Hello, everybody. We're just getting things started right now, so bear with me. Almost done. Then we'll get the pre-show started as soon as I can get some people in here. Because we got lots to talk about tonight. Let's see. Alex. And there you go. There we go. There we go. So hello, everybody. Let me just go ahead and turn everything. Actually, I shouldn't turn that off because then I regret it later. So I hope everybody's had a good week so far. For me, busy. We get closer and closer to the due date, and so I'm making sure that everything is taken care of, including with tonight, because we have plenty of big stories to talk about. One of which is going to kind of bleed over from last week, because we're going to be talking the James Gunn situation once again. Just to kind of give you guys a feel for how things are going to go. The top stories of the tech and entertainment portions are the Nintendo Direct that happened this week. So that's going to be one of the first things we talk about. And then second is going to be about Patrick Stewart reprising the role of Captain Picard in the brand spanking new Star Trek TNG series, and why people apparently aren't happy about it. Or at least a few people aren't happy about it. Pretty much the reaction online is, yay! More sequel stuff. We're sick and tired of the prequels. Which is kind of where I'm at too. But and then we also do have stories talking about some good news in the single player games department, as it looks like they're actually doing fairly well, and we're going to showcase that for you guys. We also are going to be talking about the controversy involving the IGN review of Dead Cells and how it basically ripped off a YouTuber by the name of Boomstick Gaming, and give our thoughts on that because you guys have asked. We're also going to be talking the Spyro the Dragon controversy. It looks like, because I can't necessarily figure out what exactly the problem is, but we'll go into it there. Like I said, we're going to be talking about James Gunn, and then we're also going to be talking about the Oscars implementing some new changes. And you guys wanted us to talk about that because since a few of us don't actually watch the Oscars anymore, we're too pissed off. You guys want to know what our take is on it, so we'll give you that take live. Let's see. And I do have some pre-show stories to get into as well as soon as we get either Alex or Romney in here too. Here we go. Okay, I've got them all set up. I'm not necessarily going to get into them right off the bat, but we'll talk about them just before the show. As I basically am I'm just going to go ahead and talk about this now in the pre-show, and then I'll address it near the end. This is actually my last podcast on Geek News, at least for a little while, as now I'm going to be going on complete break, and instead of writing agendas for the podcast and talking geeky stuff, I'll be doing 3 a.m. wake-up calls and diaper changing and all that fun parenting stuff that some people like doing and some people just don't. And so that's just going to be a thing. A couple of people have been a little worried since I put up my update video. I'm not retiring or anything like that. I'm just taking a couple of weeks to a month off at bare minimum to make sure that things are taken care of, and my wife isn't basically shouldered with everything, because I'm a good person and all of that. Alex can attest to that, right? I like to help out with the diaper changing and
Yeah.
I was going to say, your silence is not helping.
I thought you were going to say more, so I paused. But yeah, you do. You're a good father.
Yeah. Well, I try to be. Occasionally, because of what I do, I have to have issues with that. But so yeah, that's pretty much what we're going to be going over to tonight. I know that the title is more aimed towards James Gunn, but the Patrick Stewart situation happened a week ago, and Star Trek fans actually kind of got pissed at us because we didn't talk about it. So that's going to be the top story tonight, even though we will be talking, or at least in the entertainment portion, and then we will be talking about James Gunn because there's lots of updates. Lots of stuff to go over. So that's going to be taking up a majority of the tech portion. But for you Star Trek fans, because I'm there with you, because I think it's a good idea, Patrick Stewart is our top story tonight for entertainment. And let's go ahead and get into the pre-show agenda. Alex, are you ready for this?
I'm ready, Freddy.
So technically our first story that we need to talk about, because this is technically a very old story, and I think Alex has presented it more than once. But people did want our opinions on it when it broke last time, and we had other things to take on. Is Nintendo? So this is our secondary Nintendo talk, I guess, as Nintendo is basically suing to shut down 2 major ROM sites. Basically, this is Nintendo on their campaign to make sure that nobody is stealing their shit, roughly. So, like, unfortunately, this is kind of tyrannical Nintendo, and so the 2 sites are Torrent Freak and Love ROMs. They are getting sued to be shut down, and they got the usual notice. Like a couple of other ROM sites have shared what they got, and it's usually the same letter of like, we've received notification from Nintendo. We have to cease and desist within this amount of time, and therefore, and usually they actually and you could probably attest to this, Alex, as well as I can, because I used to follow ROMs a lot. Usually what happens is they shut down the site and then they just go to another one. Now, Nintendo is kind of hitting it so that if anything comes from your ISP and the exact same thing, then they can halt you. So at that point, I'll go ahead and get into your thoughts, Alex. What's your take on these ROM sites getting shut down by Nintendo?
I really wish companies just would not fight this fight. It's a losing battle because you fight one and it's the classic Hydra analogy. You fight one and 3 more heads sprout in its place. It's just, I think it's futile to try and fight piracy sites. You want to fight piracy, then fight piracy by, well, convenience and options. You can just look to the anime, for example, right? Before sites like Crunchyroll and Netflix and Hulu and Amazon and High Dive, before all these streaming sites existed, where did anime fans go to get brand new anime? Well, they of course went to torrents. And now that all these sites exist, well, torrenting, I'm not saying torrenting is gone for good. I mean, people still will, but it's so much, the options are there. The legal avenues are there. So now people who want to be good and want to support will go to those legal avenues, right? And that's because the industry is seeing more value, even though, yes, they do occasionally fight on piracy issues, but they see more value in just worrying about trying to build relations with these legitimate streaming sites rather than trying to go on this endless, pointless, futile campaign to fight every piracy site out there.
Well, I mean, let me play devil's advocate here for a second, okay? Because the bottom line is that, we've seen anime companies and game companies basically just say you can't get rid of them, and ergo we're just shutting them all down. Because the bottom line is that, I mean, this is a product that they were supposed to be earning some money off of. Granted, a lot of the ROMs that are on here, they're not anywhere. Some of them are getting resurrected, but a lot of them aren't. And people are getting pissed about that. And so at that point, they just immediately are, even though you add legal revenue or legal avenues to be able to pursue them, some companies just immediately assume that, people are going to pirate because which would you rather do? Would you rather pay for it, or would you rather have it for free? And unfortunately, there is a culture that basically says, gimme, gimme, gimme. And they just aren't willing to cater to them and immediately assume that we all are them.
Yeah, which is dumb because it's like, there's going to be there's going to be let me just get the cow for free, but not everybody's them. And those are the people who aren't going to buy your product anyway. So don't worry about them. Really, I get it. Some of these games are, of course, now perfectly available on the eShop.
Depending on the medium, I mean, anime is kind of ruled by the pirates, and the unfortunate deal here is that some of those pirates, they're being given legal avenues to be able to pursue them, and they refuse. And unfortunately, they're not you and me. They're in the majority.
I don't think they're in the majority at all. I mean, I don't know.
I don't think that's the case now, but 5 to 10 years ago, maybe.
Sure, 5 or 10, because 5 or 10 years ago, you were waiting, 2 to 3 years for a DVD release. Nowadays, it's pretty much, I mean, it's still a bit of a gap, but at least now when you want the new anime, it's there, it's on demand, and it's through a lot of legal channels. So, and kind of more on the ROMs. The sad thing is, like, sometimes with really old games that don't get released, or games that only are too niche, quote unquote, too niche to make a more widespread release, like, well, of course, Mother 3, which will never get the Western release that fans are clamoring for. Well, for some, this is the only way to either play it or preserve it, so to speak. Yeah. We have film preservation, and we have like book preservation. We have lots of preservation for different artistic media, but game preservation is really just kind of lagging behind. Unfortunately, it's like some of this data here is just being lost to time in the winds. And, sometimes these ROM sites and these people who dump ROMs are the ones who can be the ones to preserve it. And sometimes they're not doing anything more than that. But,
well, and unfortunately, Nintendo's approach is just, we're not dealing with pirates. We don't tolerate them. They're unacceptable. And therefore, we're just going to stop them wherever we can. Is that necessarily fair? It's debatable. Again, people kind of know my stance on pirating. I always go the legal route as long as it's available. If there's no other way to be able to do it, then I do tend to go about it, but I don't feel good about it, kind of thing. Like, I'm not sitting there going, well, everything should just be free from here on. No, I don't like the idea that I'm doing that, because I am a walking double standard at that point. So at that, and so kind of my stance here is, I can see Nintendo's argument. I mean, we've covered this back in the past. Our stuff got pirated. We're not happy about that. This podcast is on a website that, at least for a couple of episodes, that I can't take down. I can't do anything about that, but they literally just used our Twitter to get the live stream information, and they just hosted it on their site. Thankfully, we've taken care of that now so that it doesn't happen anymore. But I was pretty pissed when that happened, because that's my hard work. That's your hard work that is being exploited. And so
that sucks.
It's one of those things that I can see Nintendo's argument. I can also see the other side, kind of thing. So moving on into the next story that kind of got put on the chopping block, just because, unfortunately, it's at a point where not really a whole lot of people care yet. It's in regards to the Fox Spider-Verse that's basically trying to be built. So we knew about a couple of movies that were coming out.
Sony, not Fox.
Oh, Sony. Sorry. Yeah, Sony. So we have Venom that's coming out in October. The next one in the line, though, was supposed to be a movie based off of Black Cat and Silver Sable, two villains of Spider-Man. Not really. They occasionally become anti-hero kind of characters, and they have since decided to just scrap Silver Sable altogether and just do a straight Black Cat film. So your thoughts on creating a Black Cat film, Alex? Do you think there's enough there to do it?
I don't know. I mean, I guess. I remember bits of Black Cat from the Spider-Man cartoon. Is there enough? There might be. I don't know how much depth she has in, say, the comics, and how much material there is to work with, but I'm curious at least.
See, the only problem that I will state that I have with it is your origin's going to get screwed up, because Black Cat's origin, at least in popular culture, what a lot of people know about it is that she has taken a little bit more of the super soldier series. Like years later, the super soldier serum was recreated, and Black Cat was the one that got it. Okay, so she's basically another Captain America. So another Captain America, but she's a thief. So at that point, I can already tell you the origin story has to be dramatically rewritten to be able to accommodate that. So she has the super strength, the super agility. You have to explain it some other way. And on top of that, unless...
Any reason why, though? Why would they have to rewrite that?
Well, because Captain America is owned by Marvel.
Well, still, it's still super serum. That's a pretty generic, any kind of comic book, fantasy, sci-fi
the way that
thing.
it's been written is you really can't bring up that serum without bringing up Captain America. I mean, if you had a really good writer, you could probably justify it, and you could make that work.
I think it'd be pretty easy to write around. It's like, oh, this is the serum from Oscorp or something, and I'm trying to think, just. It doesn't have to be the exact serum that was given to Captain America. Maybe you can kind of wink, wink, nudge, nudge at it. But, it's pretty easy to write around. Super serums are super generic tropes of any fantasy sci-fi story.
Yeah, so I don't know. Like, it's a difficult thing. Plus, I don't like the whole will they, won't they kind of relationship that they try to create with Peter, because it always felt to me like this was Marvel ripping off Batman and Selena Kyle. Mm-hmm. Which is kind of what it's doing.
That's kind of the idea, kind of the whole point.
And so at that point, like, I always want, like, and usually, especially like in the Fox TV series, this was when like Mary Jane and Peter were actually considering being a serious couple and getting married. And so it's like, oh, yay, we have to have a love triangle involving Black Cat. If you can do it without going that direction, I'm completely okay with it. But I don't see how you could. Because Black Cat is a femme fatale. That's the character.
Oh, maybe they'll just do a different character. I mean, it's Peter Parker. Well, whoever Spider-Man will be in the Spider-Verse, in Sony's Spider Universe, isn't going to be in Venom. So there's nothing to say that he'll be in Black Cat.
Yeah, I'm kind of happy about that too. I'm glad that people are kind of happy about the Venom trailers and all that. I am not there with you. I think the Venom outfit and the stuff that's been in the trailers looks very, very hokey.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you, but mainly because with Venom as a character, specifically Eddie Brock, you need that rivalry with Peter Parker. That's kind of what draws the symbiote to Eddie Brock. Whereas here, it's basically like they're trying to do grimdark Spider-Man. And honestly, I mean, if any character you could do that with would be Venom, but it's still a case of why.
Yeah.
And with Black Cat, to kind of voice my opinion, I didn't know about any of the super serum stuff, and I'm pretty sure that was probably just retcon later. So to kind of add on to Alex...
If it has, then I'm not aware.
Well, yeah, it was retcon later, because early on, she was just a good thief that Peter convinced to be one of the good guys, so you don't even have to acknowledge it. You can just say, like, oh, yeah, the super serum, that's not part of this continuity.
Oh, boom. Then in that case, problem solved. I'm a little disappointed. I would like to see Silver Sable, not necessarily, but I would like to see some of the other anti-heroes in Spider-Man, like, thinking off the top of my head, Kraven the Hunter. He's always had kind of a 50-50 thing. It would be kind of fun to see a Kraven the Hunter movie, even if he was just the villain. Yeah,
honestly, Sony is very much scrambling, trying to find a new identity with what to do with the Spider-Man property.
Well, and as we also know, like, because of another story that Alex did find, is like and this actually pertains to Venom, they're looking to keep things PG-13 and kid-friendly, or at least family-friendly, so that maybe they can get the possibility of MCU crossovers.
That's a pipe dream. That's gonna hurt them. Like, just stylistically, it's kind of the same reason why PG-13 Deadpool doesn't work. I mean, honestly, you can somewhat pull it off with Venom, maybe. But again, it'll take a lot of work, especially if you make the focus less on, like the super violence. If you try to center the story on Eddie Brock learning to control the symbiote and getting it, basically getting it to cooperate with him. But
yeah, if you did the whole Agent Venom storyline right here now that I guess they're doing at least fairly recently, it wouldn't make sense because you need to have that backstory to be able to make it work.
And at the same time, as soon as you introduce Cletus Cassidy and Carnage, you have to do hard R. There is no way to do Carnage PG-13.
Actually, like, we used to have this debate like at the beginnings of this podcast, and my opinion has just changed. Like even hard R, I don't think it cuts it anymore. I think in order to hit Cletus Cassidy and Carnage to the best of it, like the absolute best fleshing out, it didn't need to be NC-17. It didn't need to be extremely gory.
Well,
and it would be dead.
Now, you wouldn't necessarily need to do NC-17 depending on how you frame the story. Like, for example, like here's how I would do Carnage in a Spider-Man movie. Like, say there were like no obstacles. Somehow Sony brokered a deal and basically they had their own Spider-Man. You would phrase it kind of like a murder mystery, kind of like Seven, where you wouldn't show Carnage like right out of the gate. You basically would have, oh, hey, there's this string of murders going on. Oh, hey, there's traces of the symbiote thing. You build it as a mystery so that you don't have to show a bunch of gore, but you can still make it seem pretty horrifying. I mean, another good example would be something like Zodiac, where it's about trying to piece together all the details. And so that could be a way you could do Carnage as an R, is a case of, okay, if you don't want to go too gory, frame it as a murder mystery. It's like, what is this symbiote? Who has the symbiote bonded with? What has made them this crazy? And then have that be the through line of Peter Parker trying to figure out who is Carnage, who did the symbiote bond with, and how can we stop him?
But see, the problem is that while you make that interesting argument, and while I would love to see like a treatment at some point, unfortunately, more than likely what's going to happen is Carnage is villain number 2 for Venom 2.
Yeah. The sad thing is there are other villains, even lesser known villains, that would give them a bit more. Again, the problem that I've noticed, especially with any Spider-Man stuff, is that everyone's in a rush to get the more well-known villains on screen. With Raimi's Spider-Man 3, they wanted Venom. They didn't care about Sandman. It's like, we got to get Venom in this movie. And Sam Raimi was like, but I kind of want to focus on Sandman. We don't care. Put Venom in this movie.
Yeah, and it was corporate mandate, too, where people, unfortunately, the fans kind of screwed the pooch because the fans wanted Venom, and the fans kept screaming for Venom. And so at that point, Sony said, okay, we have to do Venom. So at that point, then they shoehorned in and wrecked it. Roughly.
Yeah, and then with Amazing Spider-Man 2, the same thing happened again of, oh yeah, we're doing this interesting thing with Electro. Well, we got Gwen Stacy. We got to do the death of Gwen Stacy. It's like, but I'm doing this thing with Electro. We don't care. Yep. You got to do the death of Gwen Stacy. We shot all these scenes to have.
Oh, and by the way, we have a crap. Not Norman. What's the boy's name? Crap.
Harry.
Harry Osborn. We have Harry Osborn cast. We have Harry Osborn. We have to do the Green Goblin. We have to do it. And therefore we got the Green Golem.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, especially when you consider Harry Osborn as a character. Like Dane DeHaan, really good as Harry Osborn, but it was when they tried to force
as Goblin.
Yeah,
it was horrible.
And it was literally like at the halfway point, because at first it was like a case of, oh hey, Peter Parker's life is kind of crappy. Oh, here's this old friend. His life. I mean, to kind of use Evangelion as a reference, it kind of now I'm applying this in hindsight now that I've seen Ava. But it kind of reminds me of the dynamic between Kaoru and Shinji. You have the main character whose life is kind of crappy, and then suddenly this character comes along and is like, hey, let's treat you like a decent human being because we're actually decent friends. And then the halfway point where, interesting idea of, oh, he has this debilitating disease and he thinks Spider-Man's blood will be able to save him, but Spider-Man won't help him. And there, the dialogue just went downhill. Like, I knew the movie was dead as soon as they had the whole, you're a fraud, Spider-Man. And I'm just like... You gave up.
Yeah, not downhill. It plummeted. That's what happened.
Yeah, it flatlined. That was literally, for me, that was the moment the movie died. It wasn't the Green Golem. It was right at that earlier point. It's like, and this movie is dead.
Yep.
It is dead on the table. We've put on the paddles. Nothing is working. Time of death halfway through.
So before we start up the podcast, there is one other pre-show story that I want to get in here because it's just not going to fit into an agenda. There really isn't a whole lot to talk about this, but let's go ahead and do it. It is probably what's going to be the final update on the Billy Mitchell situation. As you guys have informed me, and I have since seen the stream, Billy Mitchell proved us all wrong. So he decided to get on Twitch, and I've known this for about a couple of weeks. He's been doing streams where he's been playing Donkey Kong, and he hasn't been doing very well. I think we've even reported like the score at that point he had was about 600,000. So he was trying to get better. It just so happens that about 2 weeks ago, he finally did it. He broke 1 million. He finally proved on a Twitch stream that he could do it. And unfortunately, like where that should be a good thing is like, oh, good for you, Billy. Like you did it on a legal machine, and we should and we should applaud that. Then he reminds you of why he's Billy frickin' Mitchell. He literally calls somebody and is just the most egocentric son of a bitch right off the bat. And so at that point, congratulations, Billy. You cracked 1 million. You finally did it, and you didn't have to turn in a VHS tape to do so. You did it live. I'll at least give you that credit, but man, you're an asshole. Like, if I ever met the guy, there's no way him and me would get along. Him and me would be at each other's throats at best in the green room. So at that point, you guys' thoughts on Billy Mitchell finally cracking 1 million, because the listeners did ask our opinions on it.
Congratulations, Billy, but it's a little too late because your reputation.
The band is still active. Yeah.
Yep. And it's also a case of, if you had done this when the dispute first happened, instead of sending your goons and basically throwing a hissy fit, you wouldn't have had the ban in the first place if you literally just did a live demo like this. And it basically is like, if you started with this, then you would have redeemed yourself. But it's very much a case of, yeah, I mean, good on you, but a little too late. The time to do this was much earlier. You didn't have to do some sort of weird press conference like you were running a political rally.
Well, or you didn't need to have because I'm not convinced in any way, shape, or form. Like, his friends are cult followers, as far as I'm concerned, because they just worship Billy and can speak nothing but good about him. And even it's actually been really nice to have Todd Rogers eventually get interviewed and actually have some negative things to say about Billy, like saying, yeah, he does come off as a bit of an asshole, because he does. But that's the problem here, is if you'd come out and you'd done a live stream at a con somewhere on a legal machine, I'm sure the con would have paid for the legal machine. It's Billy Mitchell playing it. That's not a hard sell for them. And instead, you were more interested in bringing out Walter Day and I'm not thinking of his name. The guy who ultimately kind of turned on him because he was part of the ruling that got Billy banned. Because he was also doing his own investigation, and his investigation proved the same result. So you had them come out instead of just doing it. And that was kind of the issue there. The only thing I'm not going to agree on with some people is, like, if he had done this earlier, he would have dissuaded the trolls. No, trolls would still be there. You couldn't get rid of them. Okay. And Billy does have people who are I'm pretty much convinced that anybody has, like, that one guy who is obsessed and must prove them wrong or must prove them right. You're going to have those people for Billy Mitchell. And this wouldn't have dissuaded either of that, but it didn't help that 80% of the stuff that was coming out was instead of Billy getting 1 million points live, it was basically playing victim with all the various things that were happening. And I'm not condoning any of the actions, kind of thing. So yay, great and all that you cracked 1 million points, Billy, but band's still active. So good on you. Have a nice life. So with that, let's go ahead and get things started for the podcast, if you guys are ready.
Sound speed.
All right. 3, 2, 1. Okay, let me just make sure I've got everything taken care of. And here we go. Greetings once again, my friends, and welcome back to Geek News, Reviews, and Opinions, the podcast where we talk the week's events in Geek for Friday, August 10th, 2018. I am your host, Adam Mickelson, a.k.a. Drac. I hope everybody's having an awesome week so far. For me, it is basically counting down the days until the baby is born, and instead of writing podcasts and writing YouTube videos and whatnot, I'm changing diapers and doing 3 a.m. wake-up calls because I love that baby that much. And unfortunately, I'm going to kind of put this throughout the podcast, but this is actually kind of my last podcast, at least for a little while I go take care of that. And then I will be back very, very soon while my co-hosts have been graciously willing to host a couple of podcasts while I'm gone. But in the meantime, let's actually get to some of the stories tonight. And first of all, I'm being joined by my usual panel of fellow geeks, fellow YouTubers, fellow awesome guys in general. And if you aren't following their content online, you should, damn it. And we're going to start things off with Stephen Romney of Studio Ghost Utah, of From the Shelf, Rhapsody in Cinema, Monster Clash, which is going to be coming out very, very, very soon. Marshall March. Romney, how you doing?
Doing pretty good. This week's been, it's been mostly a good week. I've been managing to get my weight under control, down to 193. Woohoo.
Nice.
And so, yeah, not much to really complain about. It's just been an interesting week.
Yeah, that's been kind of everybody's take across the board. And then we're also being joined by the Shadow Blazer himself, Alex Shorts. Alex, how are you doing this wonderful evening as you step out of the shadows from whatever anime you're reviewing at this given moment? Because, well, the fans demand it, and therefore you must produce.
I must produce, but yet I got nothing right now. I need to watch something real soon. Maybe it's time I revisit a series that I started like 10 years ago, but never got back to.
See now I'm just like
on my shelf for months.
I'm just envisioning in my head like somebody at their computer going, "He's not reviewing anything right now. Let's go to work. You must get back to work, slave."
What can I say? I mean, the problem is when there's like 3 times that royally suck in retail that just drain the life out of you. One is back to school shopping,
which is like late July, early September, roughly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other is, of course, Christmas time. That makes sense. And then
which
inventory
starts earlier every year.
Yeah. And of course, inventory time, which is like January for us. So, I mean, unfortunately, right now we're smack in the middle of back to school shopping, which where I work in my store means a whole lot of clearance sales, which means a whole lot of taking like 3 weeks to mark everything in the store for clearance. Not everything, but just we go through and scan each and every individual item because our store's weird like that. And
well, you're technically having to do an inventory just to figure out like what's getting cleared out.
Yeah, and I can just to kind of emphasize the weirdness. My store runs like 2 sets of clearance. One is what we call like a final clearance, where things go really like bargain bin prices, and one's just like a generic regular clearance. And we run them concurrently for whatever reason, even though we have to keep everything like perfectly separated as best we can. I mean,
because you must be Walmart.
You know, it's like we got to keep everything like super separated, yet they insist on like running these concurrently. I'd understand if they like gave it a week because our final clearance stuff does kind of clear out pretty quickly. No pun intended, but it does. It kind of sells pretty quickly, but still running them back to back, just I don't get why. It's something they do, and of course it means we got to do it. So that's my life right now. It's just work, and my birthday is coming up, so maybe that's when I'll treat myself and buy the Switch. The only problem is, of course, the new Spider-Man game comes out the same weekend as my birthday, so I'm conflicted.
It sounds to me like Spider-Man should be birthday, and then Switch should probably be holidays for you.
Possibly. We'll see.
I don't know. All right. Well, let's go ahead and get into the stories that we have tonight. And I already kind of teased them. We actually have some big top stories tonight. Starting in the tech portion of the evening, there was a big Nintendo Direct that happened recently. A Smash-related Direct that people wanted to basically bring to our attention because, well, we have to eat some crow in that regard. People might remember a few months ago we covered, I think it now is called the 4chan Smash Prophecy at this point, but it was basically a 4chan post that teased a series of events and days and everything like that. I'm not remembering it off the top of my head, but a series of events, of announcements, of character announcements, features announcements, everything like that. And a lot of the stuff that happened in that prophecy, not all of it, but a lot of it has since come to light. So let's go ahead and get into the biggest thing that people want us to eat some crow on, because we all pretty much said we didn't think this was going to happen.
Except for me. I actually said it was possible.
Oh, you did? Okay. I knew one of us had said it, so you don't have to eat some crow today, Romney. Nope. First of all, Simon Belmont has officially been announced as he is going to be whipping into Super Smash Bros. Ultimate along with his ancestor, Richter Belmont.
Descendant.
Or not ancestor, but his...
Descendant.
Descendant. Would he be grandson? No, he'd be further than that.
A little bit further.
Yeah.
Let's see. So Simon, then Youst.
See, we have to think about this now.
Oh yeah. So yeah, actually, it would be great grandson, because Youst is Simon's grandson, and then Richter is Youst's grandson.
So at that point, you have Simon, which is basically a lot of people actually asked like what the model was based off of, because, well, when you look at Simon, he looks like he's had his Wheaties. When you look at Richter, not so much. And the main reason being is that the Simon model that they've actually captured is from the original game art that came out on the covers back on the NES days. So they're keeping true to that. And Richter's is based off of the Dracula X one, but like he's built a little bit frailer.
Yeah, like they've made a few tweaks, and if you look at the model for Simon, it looks like they also added a few elements from the Super Castlevania 4 version of Simon as well, particularly with the crown on his head that wasn't present in the artwork for the first 2 Castlevania games. And so it's like they kind of combined elements from the...
It's a mix between Super Castlevania 4 and the arcade game Vampire Killer, which also gave him that crown. So, or it's either Vampire Killer or the other one. There are 2 arcade games based off of the first Castlevania, and one of them has a bulkier model that actually does have a crown on his head. So you have that, and then the other big one that I think, well, I don't know.
Yeah, this was the one we all are having to eat crow on, because this was the one we were all skeptical of.
And actually, what's funny about it is Nintendo teased it like 2 minutes before they announced, as they actually announced very clearly in their assist trophies section that they had Claptrap, aka a Kremlin, and there was like I was amongst many who were like, "That's a Kremlin, that's a Kremlin. Do they have the license? Can they actually do it?" And 2 minutes later, King K. Rool has been announced as being the next villain to join Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. He is not an Echo; he is an original character. Same thing with, well, Simon and Richter are original characters, but one of them is the Echo, and Sakurai wouldn't tell us which.
Yes, mainly because they had to pull elements from both. They basically used elements from both characters to create the moveset, so it's more of a case of they're echoes of each other, but it's not really like a case where one came first than the other.
No, I actually think they fueled each other.
Very much so, especially when you consider like some of the general attack move sets, and you can tell in the trailer which ones they wanted to highlight, because with Simon, they highlighted the Vampire Killer and the sub-weapons. With Richter, they highlighted the attacks, because if anyone who's played Rondo of Blood, both the SNES version Dracula X and the version that was released on the Wii Virtual Console and with Dracula X Chronicles, you recognize a lot of those movements as, oh, those are the inputs you can do as Richter in the various Castlevania games.
Pretty much, yeah. So we should also probably mention that 2 other Echo characters did get announced along with that, one of which being Crom from Fire Emblem, and I believe they say he is an Echo of Roy.
He's an Echo of Ike.
Oh, of Ike? Okay, so Crom is an Echo of Ike, and then we also have Dark Samus from the Metroid... This is another one where I'm eating crow. Dark Samus from Metroid Prime, as she is a Samus Echo. Which is kind of disappointing considering with Dark Samus and the way that they built her, you could have had an original character there, but I think they just decided we'll have her mimic Samus instead. And so at that point, you have these 5 character announcements. You also got the announcement of the Castlevania Dracula's Castle stage, which is a very unique one, as people might remember that like in Mega Man, you have the I can never remember the big yellow blob's name.
Yellow Devil.
Yellow Devil. He would show up as a boss. Ridley would show up in one of the Metroid stages as a boss. I don't know if he still does that now that he's a character. But this one actually has, I think they announced up to 10 different bosses from Castlevania's past that can show up, including Dracula, who apparently also is an assist trophy as well. So you can have Dracula come in, and I think he just does fireballs.
I don't think they announced Dracula as the assist trophy. He was
one of 2 that got announced as like a boss and an assist trophy. The other one we'll get to in a second.
Well, the other one was announced as both. Dracula, I think they said, is specifically a boss, not an assist trophy, though.
Okay, if you could clarify that, then I'll buy it, because I couldn't necessarily hear what Sakurai was saying at that given moment. So yes, you have bosses like Dracula. You have the Wolfman, or the werewolf. He's going to show up. You have Frankenstein. I did also see that Medusa was one of the ones that they wanted to show up.
Yeah, they also had the Mummy, and they also showed Carmilla.
Yeah. So you're going to have, and all of these will come in at random. So each time you go to the stage, you'll get one at random that will show up by breaking a window or something like that. And then also in light of this stage, they brought a whopping 34 tracks from Castlevania's past and remixed them to be able to play at random. So when you go to the stage, you'll get one of these things. But basically, as Sakurai said, when they got handed the Castlevania rights, they went nuts with it. and they popped out 34 tracks of just classic Castlevania goodness. So let's just get into the characters before we get into some of the other features that were announced for it. You know what? I'm going to go ahead and start things off with the guy who was really hoping for the King K. Rool announcement. So, Alex, what's your take on the Belmonts, Dark Samus, Chrom, and King K. Rool?
Well, King K. Rool, I probably was on the doubt train, but in hindsight, it makes perfect sense because I mean they do have Diddy Kong, so. Nothing to say that they couldn't get other Donkey Kong Country characters. Rare might be with Microsoft now, but again, they got Diddy Kong. It still should make sense.
But we have been seeing like subtle hintings that Nintendo and Microsoft have been talking. I mean, people might remember a month ago they both came together to knock Sony over the fact that crossplay isn't something that Sony does. So we've been getting subtle hintings that like Nintendo and Microsoft have been talking. And so a lot of people have taken faith in that, saying that, yeah, this is now possible. Like Nintendo could get King K. Rool.
Right. The others, I guess you could say took me by surprise. Any of the Belmonts, because God knows what Konami's doing anymore. I mean, sometimes it's like, yeah, we still want to make video games. Other times it's like, pachinko all the way, bitch.
Correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but I think we pretty much all kind of agreed when we talked about this that it was probably a hassle in and of itself to get Snake alone. And that was kind of the reason why we didn't think the Belmonts were like we were, Romney, you were hoping, but we all kind of looked at that and went, yeah, it was probably murder for them to get Snake. I don't think we're going to be able to get the Belmonts. And here you go. We're promptly proven wrong.
Yeah, and mine was the case. It wasn't even so much as a fan where I was hoping. I was just looking at kind of the pattern here where, okay, they got Snake back and they got Bomberman as an assist trophy. Likely that was the fact that they were using Bomberman as an assist trophy to promote Super Bomberman R. There was likely some additional horse trading that Nintendo did. And so it's even a case where it really depends on, was Nintendo pushing to get the Belmonts, or did Konami push saying, okay, you want Snake back? Promote these other franchises as well. And that's the other thing.
I don't think we'll ever find out.
Yeah, we'll never know. This may even just be Konami testing the waters to see if there's still enough of a demand for a Castlevania game. It's just...
I'm glad you brought that up, because a listener did actually ask us if this was Konami's subtle way of putting out a litmus test to see if people still care about Castlevania. And yeah, I think that's entirely what this is.
Yeah, especially considering that the most recent offering we got was an iPhone game that tried to bridge the Demon Castle Wars with Aria of Sorrow, but everyone saw it for what it was, as a microtransaction-riddled piece of shovelware, so...
Yeah, so I didn't even touch it, because I was like, no, this needs to be like a console or a handheld installment, not mobile. I'm not accepting mobile at this point. But a lot of people have also kind of speculated that maybe this is kind of testing the waters for maybe working out a major deal with Konami for the Castlevania games to come to the new online service. That's entirely possible. It could be testing. Here's the thing, guys. It could be testing for anything. But in my honest opinion, it is as broad as, is there interest in Castlevania anymore? Well, yeah, that's what Konami wants to know.
Well, yeah, especially when you consider that we also have Season 2 of the Netflix series coming out this October. And so it's a case of where Konami would be stupid not to try to capitalize on the hype generated for one of their properties. Because if they just added the characters into Smash Brothers and had the animated series and then did nothing else, they would be losing money there. I remember back when the first season of Castlevania came out, they were doing sales on all the different platforms. Sony, they were doing the sales on Sony, they were doing the sales on Nintendo, saying, hey,
Dude, I just barely thought about this. I actually got it wrong. I thought Dracula was the... No, it's Alucard. Alucard got announced as an assist trophy.
Okay, yeah, that explains...
Alucard got announced. And actually, that brings up another listener question that came up about this. Do we see them, because of the Season 2, do we see either Richter or Simon getting a Trevor skin? If they were going to do it, I would say it'd be Richter, because he has more of the build.
Yeah, he's got more of the build and more of the costume to actually... I see it maybe a Trevor-inspired color scheme.
Yeah.
That's the most I could see, and maybe with Simon, they could probably have a color scheme based on his Castlevania Chronicles appearance, but not in the sense of, oh, it changes the model, but more like, no, they just give it the black and red color scheme that that version of Simon is known for. And so,
yeah, the only thing I don't buy online, and correct me if you believe it or not, there's talk that like of the skins that Simon will get, that there's talk of him getting the Mirror of Fate skin. And while I don't hate that, I don't see that happening. This is paying homage to original Castlevania, not the rebooted universe from Mercury Steam.
I can see maybe, again, not like a full-on skin, but maybe a color scheme modeled after it, like what we saw with Lucina having the color scheme based on the different characters from Fire Emblem Awakening. And so it's a case of, okay, maybe a color scheme on the model that is loosely based on it, but not much more than that, considering, yeah, like they're not going to be like changing the models, but maybe if, again, it's a color scheme that just mimics the overall color scheme of that version of Simon. But yeah, Konami seems to be eager to kind of forget that the Lords of Shadow series even exists.
Yeah, well, they're in that love-hate relationship where, unfortunately, like they want. I'm pretty sure Konami wants to acknowledge its existence. I have heard that they do pachinko machines now based on it, but Mercury Steam's universe, according to the fans, is considered inferior. I don't necessarily agree, but it is considered inferior.
Yeah, like they tried. They really did. It's just, again, it was very much one of those cases where they tried and failed, which ultimately is better than failing to try. But yeah, like a color scheme, yes. A full-on skin, I doubt it. I doubt Nintendo would go down that road. Maybe Konami, if Konami was making Smash Brothers, or they were doing a new version of Dream Mix TV Fighters, which was kind of their answer to Smash Brothers with a lot of other toy companies, I can see them pushing for it. Nintendo, I don't see them going through the trouble of actually trying to create a new model or superimposing the Mirror of Fate model into the game.
Yep. So moving on into the features of it, because I want to kind of go over these as briefly as possible. I'm assuming both of you guys have watched the direct or at least gotten some kind of a summation of what was covered. So I actually just want to kind of briefly go over this. There was a lot of features announced, and I would actually like to do this kind of in the form of what was a cool feature that you guys liked that was announced for Smash, as opposed to just kind of going over them one by one, because there's a lot of stuff to go over, and frankly, I don't even have all of it in my head. I will say that there were a couple of things that I liked. One of them was the stage morph option, which basically allows that in the middle of your fight, a stage can instantly become something else. So you could have Dracula's Castle, and all of a sudden it becomes Midgar from Final Fantasy VII. You could have that, and therefore, as a Smash player, you have to readapt to the new surroundings. So I like that one. Another thing that I did like was the added option for a Final Smash gauge instead of having to rely on that item. I like that idea a lot more, because one of the things I really do like from Brawl On is the Final Smash, and I don't like having to hunt down for that item. Now, you could still, from what I understand, one of the settings is you could still have that item pop up, and it just instantly fills the gauge. But for the most part, this is just to allow for more Final Smashes to hit the arena, as it were.
Plus, it also is a strategy thing, because you can basically either use the Smash Ball, which charges it instantly, or use the Smash Gauge. And if you charge it using the Smash Gauge, you get a weaker variant of the Final Smash. And so that adds that layer of strategy of, okay, do you use it right away when you have it fully charged, or do you hold out until the Smash Ball is available and hope that you can get it to unleash the Final Smash at full strength?
Exactly. So you have these awesome options with Stage Morph. You have the Final Smash one. Another one that I think a lot of people loved was the Smash Down option that you can now get, which is basically when you're playing a party game and you activate Smash Down, you all pick 4 characters. And then after that point, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Romney, the winner is saved, but the other 3 are eliminated, or all 4 are eliminated.
All 4 are eliminated.
All 4 are eliminated, and you can't pick those from there on in, which is another thing that actually adds a little bit of strategy to it, because, like, let's just say, for the sake of argument, Romney has a favorite character. I can't remember which one it is, but he has a favorite character. Alex could be a dick now in that party and pick that character so that Romney can never get him.
Yeah, I mean, I do have favorite characters, but I'm not going to tell either of you now.
No, exactly. Now the poker face has to be on, because now, like, I have a feeling a lot of people, including when Brinton kind of brings back the reffing and all that, he's going to insist on Smashdown, because at that point, that actually allows for a lot more variety instead of just doing the same things over and over and over again. And then my final one that I'm just going to say it here and now. And Sakurai, you were a SOB when you announced like the audio port for the Switch. Release a damn soundtrack, please. A lot of the stuff that you have in there sounds glorious. And I want it on some kind of format so that I can listen to it endlessly, not carrying my Switch around with a headphones port into it.
Yeah, I doubt that's actually something that Sakurai has control over. I'm guessing that's more Nintendo insisting on that sort of thing.
But the other problem, too, is that they announced they have over 800 songs. So, like, you have to think about that. Okay, put that into a soundtrack. That'd be one expensive soundtrack.
Yeah, and that's the thing, though. To kind of look into the economics of it, that's something they would be able to pull off in Japan, not so much everywhere else. Because in Japan, people are willing to spend that kind of money on that type of merchandise. Here in the States, not so much. I mean, it's one of the reasons why Gundam struggled to find a foothold here.
So Romney, the features that got announced that you liked.
Well, aside from the ones that you already mentioned, I mean, the stage morph is pretty interesting. One thing that also caught my attention is the training mode and how it literally has the graph that kind of shows the launch distance of the techniques and gives the different lines that show you, okay, if the opponent is at this much damage, here's how far they would fly. Because I feel especially for people who are wanting to get into tournament play but are struggling to kind of understand the minutia of Smash Brothers, that's definitely a good way to help people to kind of illustrate, hey, here's the benefit of trying to, rack up the damage before you go in for the big smash. And the other aspect that I enjoyed, was technically an item. I like the concept of the Rage Blaster, where it's a case of, it's an item that gets more powerful the more damaged you are. This is why I wish Smash tournaments would do leagues where items were allowed, because stuff like that changes the strategy. I mean, does. I was one of those people that hated
the other thing, too, that probably also kind of influenced things to you, I was very interested when they got to the Pokeballs and they announced a Alolan Executor, which basically acts as a divider. So, like, if you're trying to get away from that guy who's pelting you and that goes up, you're done, son. You're absolutely done.
Yeah, and so I like the fact that some of the items add a layer of strategy. It's just, I'm one of those people that found it utterly annoying, and I can see why Sakurai found it utterly annoying. The whole Final Destination, no items. I'm just like, that's boring. That's boring, people.
It's absolutely, yeah.
I mean, at least with the Omega modes, it's like, okay, well, at least they allow you the different stages. And one last thing that I thought was interesting was the whole, okay, instead of limiting music to specific stages, it's a case of, you've got these stages that are set in these games, so all the Zelda stages have access to all the Zelda tracks, all the Mario stages have access to all the Mario tracks. I thought, okay, that's actually a nice thing there. That way you're not having to pick and choose. It's a case of, okay, you can set it so that you can hear any of that music on any of the stages within the certain series.
Yeah, and I agree with you completely. That was actually a really great idea, because then at that point, things don't get repetitive. Like, even if you're seeing the exact same stage, you could get different music and it gives you a whole other experience to it.
Mm-hmm.
Alex, what did you take away as far as features? What did you like from it?
Definitely also that I'm on board with the whole huge variety of music. That's pretty cool. And the variety of stages, adding so many more stages is really cool, because it's fun to have a lot of different environments to fight in and just keep you on your toes, especially when you like play random mode with friends. And it's like, okay, maybe you're really great at Pokemon Stadium, but all of a sudden it's like, I'm at Hyrule Castle. How do I? Oh boy, this is unfamiliar for me. That's fun. It keeps you on your toes.
And the other thing I do like about the stages is that we're not just necessarily bringing back the N64 Hyrule Castle. Okay, we're actually bringing it up to current day standards, and we're rebalancing it so that at that point, like, it can be used for competitive stuff just as much as any other stage. That was also another awesome thing. And the final thing that I want to cover on this one is we have another mysterious question that has been brought in by the man who only wishes to be known as K2SO. And this is actually a good wrap up for it. Luigi is dead. True or false?
I don't know.
I'd say false, because, well, the Mario Brothers are immortal. Although that does raise the questions of why, with both of the major reveals, did the Mario Brothers get killed? I mean, Ridley kills Mario and off screen, and then Luigi literally has his soul ripped out of him by death.
I'm thinking. Now, for people who don't know what we're talking about, the Castlevania reveal actually had Luigi die roughly, and like at the very end, he has his ghost kind of try to enter his body, and then something appears to have stopped him, and then that's when they stop the trailer.
It's Carmilla that appears in the window of Dracula's castle, and Luigi is naturally freaked out by the giant floating mask of Carmilla.
And apparently, enough people were concerned that Nintendo UK on Twitter had to ease people's fears that yes, Luigi is in fact okay.
Yeah, I mean, again,
if you believe that,
I mean, come on, he's got to be carrying at least one green mushroom.
At least one. Least one.
I mean, you never leave without one. I mean, when you start the game,
well, especially if you're Luigi, because it's green.
Well, yeah, and I mean, when you start the game, how many lives do you have? 3. So you know they're carrying at least 3 on them by default.
Pretty much. So moving on into the next story, that's pretty much all that came out of the Nintendo Smash. I hope you guys are very happy that we had to eat some crow. And here's the thing, guys, we're happy that we did, because King K. Rool is an awesome announcement. Simon Belmont and Richter Belmont is an amazing announcement. I mean, we didn't even cover this one. Rathalos from frickin' Monster Hunter is a boss that can appear at random and is an assist trophy. So you can have that happen. You can have assist trophies like frickin' Alucard come out of nowhere to smack you down. Shovel Knight is an assist trophy, although that kind of disappointed Alex because, you know, Shovel Knight was an assist trophy, not an actual character. But moving...
more of a guy who wants Shantae in the game, because come on, Shantae's awesome. Plus, she's really the last sort of swan song for the Game Boy Color. That's a legacy right there. It's the scrappy indie who should have, by all accounts, be dead, but has really regained a following and kept a cult following.
But you at least get some faith in that, because Shovel Knight made the cut. Even if it's just an assist trophy, it now means that like indie characters can be considered.
Yes, but again, for the people clamoring for Shovel Knight to be a character, though, they have now joined hands with the Waluigi chorus.
Pretty much, because I think Waluigi's also a trophy.
Yeah,
so
Waluigi's also an assist trophy, and people are wanting Waluigi as a character in Smash. It's become.
It doesn't even matter, because I can guarantee you this one's going to get banned in tournaments. Majora's Mask, the moon from Majora's Mask is an assist trophy. That's getting banned. Absolutely banned.
Well, given that tournaments never use items, even though, again, it would make things more interesting, it's that same stupid, like, Omega mode, no items. I'm just like, do you guys not like fun? I mean...
Exactly. All right, moving on into the next story that we have. This actually was a listener request, because people have been talking all over YouTube and all over the interwebs about it. And that's in regards to IGN and their fairly recent review of Dead Cells, which just barely came out on Nintendo Switch. I believe it came out last year for PC and other consoles, but now it's available on Nintendo Switch, and there's a little bit of controversy in their IGN review for it as well. It very clearly plagiarizes a smaller YouTuber, Boomstick Gaming's work. And he actually outlines it in a video that you guys can get access to on YouTube fairly easily, where he goes into verbatim like how this reviewer, Philip Mewson, I think is how you say his name, how he basically took his review of Dead Cells and in some cases verbatim just put it up as his own work, and just hope that because Boomstick Gaming is just a small little channel of 29,000, nobody would notice. Well, unfortunately, Boomstick Gaming noticed, put up a video for it. It went pretty much viral. Like most of the tech YouTubers have covered it at this point, and it got enough bad publicity towards IGN that instantly the Dead Cells review was taken down. After they did a very quick investigation, Philip Mewson was fired. I don't care how anybody else put it. They say they parted ways. He was fired. And they actually just barely today put up their brand new review of Dead Cells for Nintendo Switch to easily correct the situation. And there's actually talk, and I'm very happy about this. There's talk right now that they're trying to IGN is trying to reach out to Boomstick Gaming to not only apologize, but also for possible compensation for the funds that he basically missed out on because Mewson stole his review. And so that's the story as it stands right now. Alex, what's your take from the whole IGN Dead Cells situation that's been happening over this week?
Yeah, it's pretty scummy that that this rogue editorialist stole somebody's review from YouTube, no less.
Yeah,
really, how thick do you have to be? And when I first heard the story, I was like, "Are we sure it's plagiarism and not just sort of the aligned thinking?" Right? Because sometimes, because sometimes reviewers can kind of think on similar levels and have similar critiques. But yeah, seeing the actual evidence, of course, when I actually delved into the story, it was definitely very clear this is plagiarism.
Yep. Well, and the other thing too, I don't know if you actually saw this part, but yeah, there was actually some question on that. And then another reviewer who had done a review for FIFA 18 also pointed out with evidence all the stuff that he basically did that exact same thing for their Nintendo Switch review of FIFA 18. So at that point, you have corroboration, and it's not avoidable at that point. And I actually hear those were 2 of 10 others that got submitted to IGN. I can't confirm that number, but up to 10? This guy liked shortcuts.
Did this guy think Milli Vanilli was successful? That's the vibe I'm getting. It's a very Milli Vanilli vibe. If people who don't know what I'm referencing, Milli Vanilli was this pop duo from the 1980s that were later found out to have been lip-syncing all of their songs, and that they weren't actually singing or doing anything. They were just basically standing there syncing to an audio track. And so I look at this, I'm just like, it didn't work for Milli Vanilli. What made you think that this would work out, people?
The other thing that I actually want to point out on this one, because I've actually seen a lot of people on Twitter and Facebook going, is this as big a deal as people make it out to be? And so I actually kind of want to go through this in a good fashion. Alex, I'm not sure about your education, but I'm guessing like when you went to college, because you went for a film degree, they required you at least at some point to do some kind of a journalism class. Did they do that?
No, not a journalism class, but I had like general ed classes like English and all that. Okay. And even then, there was one film class where I did have to write a paper for.
But I'm pretty sure that if you like in some of those film classes where you actually did have to do some kind of critique for a film or for other people's work, if you came out verbatim, like in some cases Musin did, there'd probably be very stiff consequences for that, right?
Dire consequences. I don't know my particular university's policy of plagiarism, but a lot of universities run along the lines of plagiarism is a very, very serious offense where you can be kicked out for that stuff. And it wouldn't surprise me if my university ran along the same lines.
See, because unlike you, like me and Romney attended the exact same college. And I have a feeling that we took classes from the exact same professor. So at that point, a guy who had literally worked in the industry for 10 plus years, if you handed in something that was very clearly plagiaristic, he actually had a rule that went against college policy, at least from what he told us, that if you handed in something plagiaristic, you got an instant F.
Yeah,
it was intolerable.
I actually never took any of the journalism classes at Slick.
Oh, didn't you? Okay.
Yeah, like I was the weird outlier where I never took any journalism classes, yet I wrote more stories than most of the reporters the entire semester, so much so they couldn't pay me.
But I have a feeling like if you had actually like taken somebody else's review work, the paper wouldn't have kept you.
Yeah, my head would be on the chopping block to say the least, because and it's not even like, oh, just in college. This was something that was drilled into me in high school, in junior high, even as far back as elementary school, because I guess life is weird like that, where because it wasn't even a case of, oh, they drilled the plagiarism. I've seen cases of what happens when people tried plagiarizing things, because one person for their book report on Captain Underpants tried plagiarizing the novel, so much so that literally, like, I remember the moment that the teacher that would soon be my 6th grade teacher came into my 4th grade class and she's like, oh, hey, can I borrow your copy of Captain Underpants? I need to check on this book report thing because things are looking kind of weird. And it turned out it was because the kid tried plagiarizing, like, and not even like, oh, he was quoting books. Like, no, he like tried plagiarizing stuff from the book as part of his book report, thinking he could get away with it. He didn't.
No. And so I guess I'm the only one in this case. Yeah, I was in a journalism class, like, and that's the funniest thing because I was radio production, so I wasn't necessarily doing journalism. But I took one because it was required. And yeah, that was the thing. And we actually did have one or two students get immediately effed because as soon as the workload, because he required like a weekly story. He required like a weekly story because that's what a newspaper and what a news organization is going to require of you. And in fact, it's not a week, that's usually days. So at that point, when these one or two, like, people started disappearing and we all kind of noticed. And it was simply because I ran into one of them a month or two later. He's like, yeah, I needed to get a story out there. And so I unfortunately took like a paragraph from another story that had been written in the Globe, and I immediately got eliminated, kind of thing. Because, and the reason I'm pointing this out is not to tell funny stories or anything like that, but plagiarism is a cardinal, it's an original sin in journalism. Okay.
It's a sin in any field of writing.
Yes. Okay. Because it's not your work. It's somebody else's work. Obviously you're basically taking credit. And unfortunately, because of this guy's actions, it doesn't even help him in that regard because look who he picked. He's working for IGN of all places, and he picked the small YouTuber. Oh, I wonder if you did that intentionally. And even though he hasn't said as much, that's kind of the assumption across the board, is he did it because he didn't think he'd get caught for it. And because that's also the case in the FIFA 18 one, I think. There's one in there that's big. So like that's the one that stands out and that's weird. But the other ones are, they're fairly small people. So he thought he could get away with it. And that's why this is as big a sin as it is, because at that point he is literally shouldering himself on the creations of others that should have gotten that. And that's why in a lot of cases, I like IGN's response for this. They immediately eliminated him. And I'm sorry, guys, like I'm as much for giving people a chance of redemption as anything else, but he's got to go through some stuff before I'm willing to let that happen, because it was very clear he was plagiarizing very clearly and he didn't care. But on top of that, I also like that IGN, even though like we have our complaints with them, are trying to reach out with this guy. Who knows? By now they probably have. And they're actually talking about possible compensation because their video did get a lot more views than this guy's did.
Mm-hmm.
So that's very nice of them as far as I'm concerned. But final thoughts on this one before we move into the next story.
Yeah, it's very much, it's one of the first things they teach you in school. Like even in kindergarten, don't try to take another person's work and claim it as your own. Don't erase the neighbor's name off of the worksheet and write yours. That was something I literally had happen to me quite a few times throughout schooling, where people would do that, where they would erase my name. That's why.
With this particular instructor, because, and I'm not even kidding, this happened. I almost got eliminated from this class because me and another one who wanted to write for Game Informer. Again, I wasn't looking to get into a journalism degree. I was looking to be like radio guy instead and do stuff like this. But unfortunately, him and me had such very clear, very similar writing styles that it almost did look like we were ripping off each other's work. The only difference is he was writing mainstream games and I was writing indie. So there you go. Because again, he wanted to get a job at Game Informer, so he wanted to write the mainstream stuff. Okay, but that almost got me canned because we actually looked at each other's work at the end of the year or at the end of the semester and we're like, that is actually very similar. And you almost could make the assumption that I wrote this it wasn't Arkham Asylum. It was Arkham. It was the third. It was the third one.
Arkham Knight.
No, Arkham Knight's fourth. So Arkham City's second, and then Arkham Origins. I looked at his Arkham Origins review. I'm like, yeah, that actually looks like I could have written it.
Yeah, and again, it's sometimes weird things like that happen. I remember in a sound editing class where basically we were like all creating sound effects for the scene involving someone. It was like an Xbox tech demo that we had to create sound effects for, and we all ended up like doing kind of the same basic thing. None of us had talked to each other, but the teacher is just like, have you all like been collaborating? And we're just like, no, we just all chose these same effects.
Yeah, pretty much. All right, so moving on into the next story that we have, which is actually a very cool story that was presented by a listener. Specifically, they actually presented us with the Young Ye, I think I'm saying that right, the Young Ye video discussing this, which is a article from Superdata about the maturation of narrative in video games. So what this is basically doing is that they recently did some legwork and actually tried to figure out like what gamers were enjoying out of games as of right now, and actually put some numbers to it so that we could have more of a graph-driven kind of deal. And they actually found out that single-player and story-driven games are more of what people want right now. Just as much as there are gamers out there that want to play like Fortnite and PUBG and Destiny and all that stuff, there are plenty out there that want to experience a story and a narrative. And Superdata actually went and did the legwork. And actually, our buddy Alex also did a little bit of legwork, as they found out that if you look at things, a lot of the games that have been the most successful in the single player story department have netted quite a bit of bank in the time that they actually were out. So, for example, in this article, The Witcher 3 earned 69 million. I think all of this is based off of like their first month or before like any other major editions came out. So, The Witcher 3 earned 69 million in its time frame. Uncharted 4 earns 56 million. This is like gross stuff, guys. This is not accounting for profit margins or anything like that. God of War alone, like God of War 2018, 131 million in total, and in this one it's total digital revenue. That's insane. That's a lot better than the gaming world would have us believe. Like EA would totally not stand with these numbers because they want us to buy things like Anthem and Battlefield and all that, because that's where all the money is, right? No, that's just where your failing budgets are.
Yeah, and I think part of the reason for this is that, and it's something we've been noticing with things like superhero movies and just trends, we're starting to hit a period of burnout. People are getting burnt out on the MOBAs. People are getting burnt out on the battle royale shooters. And so it's a trend that you always notice. It's the same reason why people kind of got burnt out on fighting games back in the 90s, and why shooters were able to come into vogue was, okay, you had like fighting games and platformers, but because of the saturation, people got burnt out. They wanted something new. Then in comes games like Quake and Halo, and they're just like, oh, hey, here's something new and different. And then it's the same sort of trend we're seeing here, is that we're being inundated with so many multiplayer focused games. I mean, you've got Fortnite, you've got PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds, you've got Overwatch, you've got Battleborn. I mean, the list goes on and on. You've got so many things, and then you've also got League of Legends, Heroes of the Storm, and all the other like MOBAs. So many like massively multiplayer games. And so now we're kind of seeing that trend of, okay, well, the market is saturated in these fields, now, and especially as gamers are now getting older and maybe don't have the time to invest in a lot of these multiplayer games, you're starting to kind of see the trend of people going towards shorter games or games with more of a narrative focus, because those you can pick up and play like anyone would pick up and read a book. It's a case of, okay, this is something that doesn't require me to actively engage with a lot of people. It just allows me to enjoy the story and not have a 12-year-old screaming in my ear.
Pretty much. Now, Alex, like I said earlier, I actually had you do some legwork to see if you can try and find some of these budgets and maybe the profits that they were actually able to rake in. Were you able to find any of them?
I was able to find a few. Most of them are kind of rough estimates, but I can go down the list for you.
Go ahead and do so. So I basically gave him a list of games that were successful in 2016, 2017, and 2018, all of which were heavily emphasized on a single-player narrative. If they have an open world, that's just kind of a consequence of things. So go ahead and list off what you were able to find, Alex.
Okay, so Uncharted 4, I couldn't find any hard data for, but there's estimates of maybe $50 million budget without marketing. And like I said, that's unverified. So it made already 56 million alone in digital sales.
That's 6 million in profit right there. That's a lot of money, guys.
Sold 8.7 million copies in as of December 2016. Over 40 million as of 2017. So Witcher 3, about 10 million sold by the end of 2016. A combined 33 million units sold for the entire series. A budget of 81 million. So you're saying 10 million profit? 10 million units sold.
Oh, 10 million units. Okay. All right. And so like 80 million, and this actually clocks at a 69. And oh no, you were saying that was the budget for it, 81 million.
Yeah, 81 million.
So
and that looked a bit more. I think that one was verified. I think that was in public interviews. So that one I can confirm.
Okay, so at that point, maybe at that, because I think The Witcher 3 has still been a fairly good seller. We can probably assume they've made their budget and then some.
I would think so.
Yep.
Horizon Zero Dawn. So a budget over 45 to 47 million euros, which is about 51 to 53 million dollars. It's sold 7.6 million units as of February 2018. Couldn't find any data on gross or anything. So just units sold.
So that sounds to me like that's pretty close to Uncharted numbers. At bare minimum, like 5 million that they made profit off of.
Yeah,
that's awesome. So what we mean by made profit off of is that they paid back their budget, and then this is what gets handed extra to all the various people. And this is a gross profit, by the way. It's not necessarily determining this company gets this company gets that. This is gross profit that has happened from sales of the game, kind of thing. Were you able to find any others?
Yeah, Hellblade, budget of less than or equal to about $10 million.
Wow.
$1 million profit, I think, or at least 1 million, not million profit. Sorry, 1 million copies sold as of June 2018.
All right, and that's actually an awesome thing because Hellblade, like they got the game of the year by most publications last year, and they were restricted to what was it, PC and PS4? Those were the places that could come out. And now that they are part of the Xbox umbrella, we've already had this teased that Hellblade is going to be coming to Xbox if it's not there already. That's a whole new market that is they're going to make bank on, because that's right in the demographics that they're looking to sell. So, I mean, these are amazing numbers. Do you have any others, or is that pretty much it?
Last one, couldn't find a budget because Japan is way more notoriously secretive, but Breath of the Wild has sold 10.40 million copies between the Switch and Wii U. So Breath of the Wild, I'd say, is a pretty big success.
Oh, yeah, it's a huge success, mostly on the Switch, but even for the Wii U, it was fairly successful, better than Nintendo actually. I remember this actually in an article. The Wii U version of Breath of the Wild actually did better than they thought it would. So at that point, like a lot of their speculation went to the Switch, and the numbers were fairly good on the Wii U as well. So that was a good thing as far as they were concerned, because it meant that some people were actually making use out of the console that kind of failed in their eyes. So these are a lot of really great numbers, and actually something fairly optimistic in my eyes, because as I've said, and we've had this debate a couple of times on the podcast, is like, you know, we look at games like Anthem and Destiny and not necessarily Fortnite and PUBG, but like Call of Duty, Star Wars Battlefront, where they have these huge, ginormous budgets. I can guarantee you, because you just barely said Uncharted 4 was 50 million.
Possibly. Again,
that's like half of Battlefront's budget. At least. That's like half of Battlefront's budget. So at that point, you could already say that since they're exponentially cheaper to be able to make and put out, and, you know, Uncharted is an example of just like a single player driven narrative. Think of like God of War, where they actually do have an open world and people are still looking for, they just barely found the final Easter egg for God of War, and it's already at 131 million. And I actually know the budget for that one. I think it was like in the 60 to 70 million area. So they've already made bank on that. Huge. And so at that point, pretty much guaranteed sequel, pretty much guaranteed that money is going to go to other places. And I'm very happy about that. But overall, this is actually an amazing thing to hear. Like the game companies want us to know, like, all the multiplayer stuff is the stuff that's doing very, very well. No, this is actually evidence saying otherwise. Single player games are doing amazing right now.
Yeah, I mean, EA's president is always proclaiming single player is dead, multiplayer is where it's at now, but there's so
and it's
much
actually one of the things
contrary.
That I don't know if you've actually ever seen this, and if you haven't, then I recommend that you see it, Alex. I think it's Cory Barlog, I think is his name. He is the creator of the new God of War. He's been giving the CEO of EA and all of the EA announcements crap, because his single player game just did a lot better than their plagued with microtransactions multiplayer game. A lot better. So that's an amazing thing to be able to say. So unfortunately, just to keep things on task, like final thoughts on this one before we move on. But to me, this is an amazing thing because it means that I'm kind of right in this aspect. Like single player driven games, which are cheaper to make, can be sustainable. They can actually make profit margins for these companies to care about as long as they keep the budgets cheap. What about you guys? Where are you at with it? Final thoughts.
Well, I mean, it just kind of goes to show that the people in the industry don't know the industry as well as they think they do. I mean, it's very much a case where I guess it just kind of proves you can't force a trend. They just happen. You can't expect everyone to jump on the multiplayer bandwagon. I mean, we all remember what happened when Microsoft announced the Xbox One having to be online all the time and how much of a field day Sony had with that. And so it's a case of sometimes you just can't predict the market the way. I guess the thing is that a lot of the people are thinking, okay, we're still marketing these towards like younger kids who are getting allowance money, but a lot of the money in the games industry is coming from gamers that are now adults who don't have the time and money to devote to hours upon hours of these multiplayer experiences. And that's something I think they kind of need to understand is that, hey, the demographics of people who play games has gotten a lot wider than the 1990s.
Pretty much, yeah. So, Alex, final thoughts on this?
Yeah, it's great to know when you can have a modest budget success story, and that, contrary to EA's claims, multiplayer is not all where it is now, and that single player is not dead. I don't want to play multiplayer either. I'm not interested. And like Romney says, I'm an adult, and many of us are adults. We have time limitations. We have responsibilities. We can't, get invested or worry about who's on a server tonight to play. Some of us just want to sit down for a couple hours and just play a game for a while.
Yeah, exactly. I agree completely with you on that. And I mean, just look at all of the games, like all of the small budget games that you like have been able to play, Alex. Like Hat in Time was fairly correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know the numbers, but I think for Gears for Breakfast, Hat in Time was a success outside of the Kickstarter. So they were able to make some bank off of it, and therefore be able to maybe not make a Hat in Time 2, but maybe make something else that people could get into. And there's been tons of other games that have been single player driven. I was actually very happy when Bethesda did the commercial for like make single players. I can't remember what it was actually called, but it was something along the lines of make single player great again, something like that. I need to go dig out the commercial and I'll share it on Twitter for you guys. But it brought a tear to my eye, but it also made me laugh hysterically because it's one of those things I really wish the gaming industry would learn. As much as the multiplayer games are loved, a narrative is like a story is what a lot of people care about.
Yeah, I mean, even when you look at stuff like MMORPGs, as I'm sure you can even attest, Adam, the narrative is what keeps players coming back. I mean, yeah, you've got things like PvP, you've got quests, but if you just have fetch quests without any context, then...
I'm thoroughly convinced that, like, in the WoW perspective, WoW is now celebrating, I think we're coming up on 15 years of World of Warcraft alone. So like that's already bigger numbers for Warcraft itself and also for Blizzard. So at that point, I have this debate with a lot of people. Like they think that PvP and raiding is what keeps that game alive. I disagree entirely. It's the narrative from each expansion that keeps people invested and makes them want to go back. I mean, look at this week alone. I'm pretty sure Alex, Romney, you guys aren't WoW fans, okay? I'm pretty sure at some point you have heard about the 50-50 bullcrap or the 50-50 divide that has happened amongst World of Warcraft this week over events in the game.
Well, not too much, but
stop trying to prove me wrong, Romney.
Like that's a whole different hill. You're on a whole hill in a whole other country there.
I found it interesting the like mainstream media. I'm not even kidding on this. I can't remember which channel it was. My local news discussed this because there was not an altercation, but there was actually like a very public debate at a local coffee shop over the circumstances of World of Warcraft. That's how bad this has gotten. And now you have IGN. I mean, obviously the usual suspects, IGN, Polygon, Kotaku, all of them covering it. But then you had people like The Hollywood Reporter talking about World of Warcraft.
Yep. And again, it kind of goes to show that you need that narrative there to draw people in. To kind of continue the example, yeah, MMOs have fetch quests, and on the one hand, you could have it where it's like, oh, you go here, grab this arbitrary number of items, and bring it back to this point. But you need a narrative to give that fetch quest context, to give the player a reason to actually care enough about, even if it's just giving them enough of a reason to care of, oh, if I do this quest, I get this much gold, or I get this item. You need that narrative to give them enough context so that they'll actually do the damn quest.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like in an MMO, the usual kind of quest that you're going to get is like going to be go kill 10 deer, go kill 10 rabbits, and you or not rabbits, but go kill 10 rats. Why are you killing 10 rats? Because rats bring disease, and you're being told that in the quest text. And so at that point, like if you don't read the quest text, then you know kind of how this is going to go. But if you're reading from the story perspective, you're killing 10 deer to give food. You're killing 10 rats to prevent disease, kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's even kind of the whole point of the Goblin Slayer manga and light novel series, where it basically is a case of, hey, yeah, you've got all these high-level heroes off fighting the big bad, but you still need people doing this lower-level stuff as well. Otherwise, towns are going to get overrun by goblins.
Pretty much, yeah. So unfortunately, we need to move on because, again, we're kind of running short on time, but I do also want to cover this one because listeners did ask for it. We've had a little bit of bad news come this week for Spyro Reignited Trilogy fans, as it looks like the physical release of Spyro Reignited Trilogy will only contain the first game. Now, unlike the Insane Trilogy or any of the other collections that you can think of off the top of your head, which house all the games, this one will only house the original Spyro the Dragon, and then you have to, I actually had to confirm this, you have to download the other two games for it to work. And the original conflict that I had with this was there was actually some stories reporting that they were locked. And they were on the disc, but they were locked, and you had to like go beat Spyro, or you had to go turn in a code online to unlock the other two, which would have been roughly the equivalent of on-disc DLC. And we all know how well that worked out for Capcom. Yeah. So at that point, I was able to confirm, no, the way that it works is Spyro 1 is on the physical release, and you have to download the other two games. So technically, Ripto's Rage and Year of the Dragon are digital releases. So already this has sparked a lot of problems with Spyro fans, as they were really hoping, like with the Insane Trilogy, they would be getting all three games on physical release. They wouldn't have to rely on an internet connection to be able to get the other two. Oops. That's a bit of a problem. So Alex, it already looks like you have a thought.
It's just, why do companies need to make things more unnecessarily complicated for their customer base? It's just, this is so unnecessarily stupid.
And what makes it even better is that we don't even know, like, according to this article, we don't even know the requirements for the downloads or anything like that. This is literally Activision's, after Activision's statement, it's unclear what the downloads will require, what measures you're going to be able to take. It's messed up now. Like, they took a really great idea, and I think they basically just shoved it down the toilet, unfortunately.
Basically, they did the same thing they did with Tony Hawk Pro Skater, where you buy basically the first part, and then you have to download the rest of the game as a patch. I mean, at least this time you get one complete game instead of just the tutorial level.
Yeah, this is... just kind of going over this, this was not a good decision as far as I'm concerned, because the bottom line is, if the Insane Trilogy could do it, in my mind, there's no reason why Activision, a fairly big company in their own right, could do this themselves. And they instead decided to do it this way. It's a good thing that one of my favorite companies is not as tied to you as other people think that it is.
Yeah, and it's very much a case of, did Activision not learn their lesson? Because when they pulled this crap with Tony Hawk Pro Skater, it was a case of, hey, yeah, that's actually kind of a scummy thing to do. And naturally, that game flopped harder. But then again, that game got shoved out the door as quickly as possible because they were losing the license the day it was released. So looking at this, to kind of explain the logic that these companies are running under, that a lot of people may not realize, when you're printing physical copies of the game, you have to submit the printing order to the publishing house that actually prints it and burns the DVDs and Blu-rays. You have to submit that order ahead of time. And what a lot of companies have been doing, which again is a very dumb idea, is that in order to hit those release dates, they basically say, okay, we'll get it into a state that's at least bootable, and then we can patch the rest, so that way we can have copies to sell, and then we can send out the finished game later over the internet. And that it's kind of the same vein as the anime mentality of, we'll fix it for the Blu-ray. It's a case of, we'll patch it out later.
Yeah, and this is actually one of those times where, like, for an MMO like WoW, that makes sense because patches are going to be happening. Patches are going to be a way of life for you if you're playing WoW. But in this case, where you were hoping to have 3 games on this disc to play anytime you want, no, that's not how it works. All you got is the original Spyro. I could only imagine people who are pissed off at this point because they don't like the original Spyro. They like Spyro 2. Oh, crap. You don't have access to that on your disc. You now have to have an internet connection. And oh, wait, you live in a remote area where an internet connection is not as viable. That hurts. That's $60 wasted as far as you, the consumer, are concerned. Kind of thing. Because you basically you don't get the game that you wanted. Whereas with the Insane trilogy and with the Spyro or the Sly Cooper trilogy and all of the other collections that have come out over the years, you have the games right there, right then. You can take them on whenever you want.
Yeah, this is something that even Konami understood you had to get right, even with their botched ports of Zone of the Enders and Silent Hills 2 and 3. Even they understood, hey, let's at least make sure all the games are on the disc.
Exactly, and they're workable kind of thing. And instead, in order to meet from what I understand in my homework, in order to meet a deadline, Activision decided to cut some corners. And this was the one time where it made no sense to do so. None. If this had been Destiny, that would have made sense. If this had been Call of Duty, this would have made sense. But not with a collection of remastered Spyro games. So final thoughts on this one, because that's pretty much all we got on this one. But final thoughts before we move on into the entertainment portion of the evening.
Don't make your products needlessly complicated and convoluted. Simplicity is how you win your customers and keep your customers.
Yeah, and to add on to that, if you need to push it back, just let people know, hey, we ran into some trouble. We have to push this back. Even Nintendo understands this, at least I speak from experience with Twilight Princess and the pre-order that was made so far in advance that GameStop took pity on me and told me to stop adding money to the pre-order.
Buddy of mine just barely put up an interesting way to take this on. So anybody else getting a 2014 Xbox vibe from this situation?
Pretty much. I mean, this is exactly that. And honestly, it's just there needs to be a bit of a transparency of, hey, this turned out to be a much bigger project than we expected. We had some bugs we had to work out. If you're honest and open saying, hey, we're pushing it back because we need to fix a few things, even if it's by like a month, then yeah, just make that announcement and just say, hey, we have to fix a few things. Can you guys kind of wait a little bit? And if you're honest, the player base will listen to you. They listened with Twilight Princess when it got pushed back so many times. Look at the Kingdom Hearts fan base and how it's been holding on hope for so long. Yep. And it's a case of, if you're honest and saying, hey, we kind of had to push things back, they will listen and they will understand.
Or look at the indie crowd for Bloodstained. You still technically don't have a Ritual of the Night release date. You have Curse of the Moon, but you don't have Ritual of the Night, and yet they are the most patient souls ever, and it's because they get updated. Like, this is why we have to push it out.
And honestly, it's a case of the short-term gains from the holiday season are not worth it. I mean, again, look at what happened to Street Fighter Cross Tekken, the game that sold so poorly that the Tekken Cross Street Fighter game we were supposed to get got canned. They never openly stated it, but we all assumed it got canned because of the poor backlash.
Yep, pretty much. All right, so we're moving on into the top story of the entertainment portion of the evening. This one technically broke last week, but because we had Shay on and we had a couple of other stories to take on, we did not talk about it ourselves. But Star Trek fans rejoice. Patrick Stewart, while at, I think this was San Diego Comic-Con or one of the conventions, Patrick Stewart had an amazing announcement for people as he announced that he was going to be returning as Captain Jean-Luc Picard in a brand new Star Trek series that would be a sequel to the Next Generation. Now, a lot of people, in particular, it is a sequel to the last iteration of the Next Generation, which is the movie Nemesis. So at that point, this is going to be further into the timeline, actually kind of going into a Captain Jean-Luc Picard going into retirement kind of thing. Like, it's going to be a lot older and dealing with different situations in a different federation and all of that stuff. But the other interesting part of that is he also did announce that he would be part of the writing staff as an executive producer for it. That was interesting as far as I am concerned, because Stewart is not normally the guy that does that. He is technically able to do so, but in a lot of cases, the way that I understand Patrick Stewart is that he likes to be the talent. You know, like, if he's going to be the actor, even in his role with Family Guy and all that, he is the talent, and that's how he sees it. This time around, though, because of his protection of the Jean-Luc Picard character, he has decided to step in and also help out with the writing as kind of a suggestion person, not necessarily writing the episodes, and also executive producing them. Now,
let's kind of clarify a few things, because a lot of people may misunderstand what the term executive producer actually entails, because it can entail a bunch of different things. I mean, it could range from something as simple as, oh, he's just ponying up some of the money, to, oh, he's got creative control.
In the case of like Steven Spielberg with Michael Bay, he's writing the checks.
Well, yeah, I mean, and to even use our own videos as an example, I listed Adam as the executive producer of the Genshiken video because he provided the recording equipment and the resources for us to record. It was very much, he more or less, without actually paying money, kind of bankrolled it in this case of he allowed us to do it as the Geek News Group. He had the equipment, and thus why he had executive producer credit, since he helped with the logistics of it, because that's what an executive producer more or less is. It's an umbrella term for someone who is, they've contributed, but they're not part of the actual production team, and so they're just the executive producer, not necessarily the producer, which is a whole different job.
Yeah, so I kind of want to divide this story up a little bit, because there is a second half to it. First, going into this announcement. So the fact that there's going to be now, the other downside of this is that this new TNG series is, like Star Trek Discovery, going to be behind the CBS All Access service. So you have to have that service in order to be able to watch this new series. They're hoping that with this new TNG that people will buy it, and therefore only for Star Trek The Next Generation. So going off of these details, what are you guys' thoughts on Star Trek The Next Generation coming back in the form that it's coming back?
I'm getting kind of a bit of a Star Trek V sort of vibe, but hopefully done better. For those of you who may not know, and I may be getting the wrong Star Trek movie, but Star Trek V, which was directed by Shatner, had the usual case of, oh yeah, we have this new ship, and it's like literally the line says it all. It's like, I need Jim Kirk, and it's a case of, yeah, you can tell that he probably requested that line specifically, and at least with a character like Picard though, and
he didn't request it, he wrote it.
Yeah, he wrote it. Again, it shows, the point being, it shows right there a case of, I'm getting kind of a similar vibe of, okay, is this going to be a case where he's meaning to retire, but then something calls him back that requires his expertise, thus the Federation basically pulls a Solid Snake and asks him to come out of retirement.
Yeah, we're not sure.
And honestly, though, I hope it's handled better in the case with a character like Picard, because unlike Shatner, Patrick Stewart doesn't have the ego. I mean, he had the ego when he first started in Next Generation, but in working with the cast, he kind of softened up a little bit. And because from what I've read, when they first started, he was very much like the serious, I'm a classically trained actor. Yep. But after spending 5 years on this show, he loosened up. He became really good friends with the cast and basically evolved as an actor.
Yeah, so that's the funniest thing is, like, the first 5 years, nobody had anything good to say about him. But that was just because that's how he handled things. But after he warmed up, that's where you get a lot of the funny stories.
Yes, and partially it was because he didn't expect to be on the role as long as he was.
No, he didn't. He thought, I think the story he tells is he thought he was going to be gone by the first season.
Yeah, he thought it wasn't going to last the first season, especially considering that Riker was kind of being framed as the new Kirk when you look at Jonathan Frakes in season 1 as opposed to...
he thought, honestly, that he was supposed to be the mentor character to Riker, and then eventually, like season 2 or 3, Riker would come into his own and he'd be kicked off.
Yeah, but that's kind of the immediate vibe I'm getting. I'm just hoping they're handling it better. On the one hand, though, I can understand why they're doing it, because Star Trek Discovery, aside from all the crap with CBS All Access, because that's a whole separate can of worms, as a show, it was very controversial. You could kind of tell the people writing it were using Discovery as a mouthpiece for their own opinions and not really understanding how to actually address political issues through Star Trek.
Yeah.
I mean, especially, I remember having this debate with my older brother when he saw a few episodes, like, oh, they tried to do the whole, oh, they're creating a wall and stuff like that. So, like, okay, well, when you actually look at the logistic of what the Federation is doing to the Klingons' actions seem somewhat justified. It's very much the case of, oh, hey, it's very much...
The way that I've actually heard it described is where Roddenberry had the subtlety of a feather, the writers of Discovery had the subtlety of a wrecking ball.
Pretty much. That summarizes it perfectly, because one thing people need to understand about Star Trek as a franchise, as a story, even when you go beyond Gene Roddenberry's original vision, and it's actually a quote from an article that puts it best: Star Wars is about taking down the man. Star Trek is about being the man, about being in power and the responsibility that entails. I mean, that's why you have the whole notion of the Federation exists in a future where Earth has put aside all of its petty differences.
Yeah, an ultra-optimistic future.
Yeah, that's the whole idea, especially when you consider the kind of life Gene Roddenberry had led up to that creation of Star Trek. Yeah. You can see where he's coming from. And that's a fundamental thing people don't understand. And as you got into Next Generation, when Roddenberry kind of backed off on trying to control the story, they decided, okay, well, instead of having a unified humanity facing foreign threats, it's a case of, no, let's actually explore the power dynamics within the Federation and all the different issues, being the captain of a starship with thousands, if not millions, of crew members on board and the responsibility that would entail. I mean, when you consider the notion, I mean, the classic debate between Kirk and Picard is a case of, oh, you had Kirk who was turned into a Borg, then was changed back and was still allowed to lead, whereas in modern day you have people raising concerns of when a pilot is taking
he'd be horribly compromised.
Yeah, and so it's a case of, I can see why they're going in this direction, because one, Discovery burned a lot of people between locking it behind a streaming service that nobody asked for and nobody will really even want, even with this new sequel series. It's a case of, okay, let's maybe try bringing it back to something that Star Trek fans enjoyed on, hey, Patrick Stewart is returning our calls, so let's see if we can bring him on.
Well, and the other thing that also needs to be considered is a lot of the things that you said about Discovery. Now, granted, I've seen the first episode and about halfway into the second. So I can't necessarily state whether or not those messages for Discovery are accurate, but I've read the stories just as much as anybody else. So at that point, like, I actually honestly believe because of Discovery, that's why Patrick took on the executive producer, and also has made it very clear he's very protective of the Jean-Luc Picard character, is that he is very worried that if you get the same kind of Discovery people writing him, because even Patrick has understood for a few years now when things went wrong for those characters. In particular, I have heard him talk about Star Trek Insurrection and how people didn't like how preachy the Jean-Luc character became. And so at that point, it's very clear Patrick learned those lessons and knows exactly what people are expecting of it. And that's why he said, I want to be part of this writing staff. I want to give suggestions because I want to protect this character, which I don't think you guys are willing to do. You're more willing to tell a message story. I'm more willing to tell things the way that Picard would tell them.
Yeah, and again, it goes in the same case where, yeah, I mean, Star Trek is known for those speeches because it does what a lot of science fiction kind of did back in the day, where each episode was more or less a morality play. It was meant to demonstrate some aspect of the human condition that we either needed to improve on or embrace. That was kind of the whole point of it. And Next Generation decided, okay, well, let's address this. I mean, a good example, when Data is put on trial, it's a case of, okay, yep, are we going to try him as a machine or as a person? And you basically have that debate of what constitutes humanity in the eyes.
Yeah, it's actually one of the best moments in all of TNG, as far as I'm concerned. What Romney is talking about is the episode "The Measure of a Man," where Data's humanity gets put on trial. And it's one of those things where, like, I'm in a very deep argument with people. I find that clip. I find it and I just put it up so that, you know, people can understand where some of the folly of their arguments might actually be in these cases.
Yeah, and that's something Star Trek at least given the problems that even the new Star Trek 4 movie is having with both Chris Pine and Chris Hemsworth both saying no and not coming back, which just barely broke, that's kind of something Star Trek needs to embrace. That's one of the reasons why I liked Star Trek Beyond, is because it understood that, hey, these aren't just action heroes. These are smart, intelligent characters that actually think through things, even if they have to think through things quickly.
Well, and this is also another point where I'm going to give Pine some credit. I think Pine is listening to the fan base, and the fan base is there's a reason why this TNG announcement is so awesome, is because people are kind of tired of the prequels. They really want to have a continuation of the story, and this would provide that for them.
Yeah, and not just a continuation, but a return to form, which is the important thing here, because with the J.J. Abrams films, again, in my opinion, Beyond probably the best of the three, because Beyond at least got close to understanding what made Star Trek work.
I would agree,
And what we're seeing here is that fans are kind of sick of the mystery box format that Abrams is so well known for. They're sick of pointless fan service. They're sick of basically pandering. They want something that is Star Trek the way it's meant to be, but not in a fan sense of, oh, it has this, that, and the other. It's like, no, it goes to the fundamental idea of, let's take a look at the human condition and actually hold a mirror to our own world. That's what Gene Roddenberry intended. Granted, he was more optimistic, but that's what the writers of Next Generation did later on.
You would actually say that's probably the greatest thing that TNG ever did, was like it actually took that aspect and amplified it, where the original series, it did it, but it also had other things to tell.
Yeah, and so that's kind of what fans are hoping for. I'm cautious. I mean, I'm not going to watch it because I'm not going to pay for CBS All Access, but it's very much a case of, hopefully they've gotten their whole mouthpiece idea out of their system with Discovery and can actually go back to trying to tell kind of deeper stories instead of hoping to use even the character of Picard as some sort of mouthpiece or straw man.
So, Alex, you've kind of heard all this debate. What is your take on it? I don't even know if you've ever watched an episode of TNG. Have you?
Maybe I've seen like a handful, maybe here and there, but I'm not a Star Trek fan, so this is outside my wheelhouse.
Okay, so you don't really have too many thoughts on Patrick Stewart returning or anything like that?
Not really.
Okay.
You know, he's a great actor, obviously. I've seen him in other works, obviously, and I've seen.
Well, and you've seen him as Picard.
I've seen him as Picard, because I'm sure I've seen a handful of Next Generation, because my dad is a fan, and so I've seen it here and there. But
and I think your dad's very excited about it. So, all right, and the other part that I want to hit with this, and then we'll kind of wrap it up because we got other stories to get into. Unfortunately, while the majority of the reception was good, like a lot of people love the idea of a new TNG movie. I can already tell you, like my family, who is Star Trek fans, they're all excited for it. They actually all are getting CBS All Access, except me, because I've dealt with that player and I'd rather shove things into my eye socket than deal with that player ever again. So at that, like, I'll wait. I'm okay. I can wait for the DVD or whatever, because I already know Discovery's getting one. Unfortunately, we also had naysayers come out, and for this, I'm sorry, I'm just going to go ahead and let my bias show here. Stupidest reason. And that is that apparently, because you want to do Captain Picard, you're racist. Because in order to be able to do the only reason you're doing a Captain Picard based series is because you wish to placate old white men, and insert whatever else you want to add in here. But the other article that we actually have is an opinion article that basically goes into that stuff, roughly stating that, yes, a lot of this also is to placate a very biased audience, even though, like, I know tons of fans of varying races that love TNG, love it like a son they never had, and love the announcement that Picard is coming back. So do you guys have any other thoughts on that particular element of it? In my opinion, I literally drowned it all out. I'm just like, I don't even care, because Picard would even look at you all and just smack his head.
Well, to kind of play devil's advocate, I can somewhat see where they're coming from. Somewhat, considering that this isn't the only new Star Trek series they're bringing to All Access. They've also announced that there's going to be...
this is one of 4.
Yeah, one of 4, and the other is a rumored teen-oriented series. So what would basically, at least when I saw a teen-oriented series, like something you'd see on the CW, so it's basically Star Trek does the 100, because that's more or less what the 100 is basically Star Trek with teenagers. At least that's how it started. It was basically Star Trek, but Lord of the Flies with teenagers. So basically Lord of the Flies. And so it was a case of, I can see where that skepticism is coming from, bringing back an established actor, especially after 3 movies that were very much all about challenging the status quo, challenging the canon, and changing everything. I can see where that skepticism comes from. For the people who are jumping on it's to placate the white men sort of thing. If you know about Patrick Stewart's history, yeah, that argument doesn't really quite hold up, considering a lot of the values that he's championed. But I can see kind of where the skepticism may be coming from.
I actually liked how Patrick responded to a lot of that stuff on social media. He just, he almost, for lack of a better term, he Bruce Lee'd it. He just let it run off his back. He didn't even care. He was just like, he basically went, oh, so anyway, I'm really excited to be able to come back and play as Jean-Luc Picard, and here are the ideas that I want to bring to it, kind of thing. Yeah, so I'll give him major props for doing that.
Honestly, that's the best way to do it on Twitter. When people throw crap at you, you just dodge, keep walking, and keep talking.
Pretty much. Alex, any thoughts on this one?
That's the usual, whiners are gonna whine. So what are you gonna do? Glad Stewart's just being like, okay, that's a thing. Anyway, on to the series I'm working on. I'm very excited.
Exactly. You know, this is just kind of how Patrick does things.
Yeah, like someone needs to take like the clip of him like with the hat and cane dancing on the Enterprise, and then just put "haters gonna hate."
Mm-hmm. Or either that, or I really wish that like we could have some kind of a GIF somewhere of "Shut up, Wesley," just so that we can all, because that's the problem, is like all of these naysayers. I've seen it on social media all over the place. It's like we have a million more Wesleys out there, and so we really wish we had a GIF just like "Shut up, Wesley."
Honestly, though, that does raise an interesting thing that I wonder if Star Trek could actually explore. What would social media look like in the time of Star Trek with things like the Federation? Now, again, it sounds crazy, but I'm just like, okay, that's something, if it was in the hands of the next generation writers, that's something I would want to see is, okay, how would social media evolve with the advent of the warp drive and deep space exploration and all of that?
It makes you wonder, yeah. It really does.
I mean, and now I'm just thinking, okay, would you have like just this AI that would basically act as the social media? Would it be like holograms that it's like, okay, people post on social media and then you have a hologram of that person stating the thing? Okay, I better just sit down and write the script and see.
Yeah, please do, because the other thing too that I want you to do is I want you to make Picard like the stereotypical old fart that's on those social media that never wants to be there.
Well,
because that's the character.
Yeah. I mean, that's the spectrum of old people on Twitter. You've got the people who don't want to be there, and then you've got the Alan Alda, who's the world's oldest millennial.
Yeah, pretty much. Alan Alda is a very unique case in that regard. So moving on into the next story that we have, you thought we were done talking about controversy. Oh no! As now we're actually kind of getting into the title of this episode. So people might remember a couple of weeks ago, we talked about the James Gunn situation. James Gunn had been fired over some tweets and some other social media posts of basically pedophilic behavior, amongst other things, that Disney wasn't cool on, and therefore removed him as director of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. This got a lot of backlash towards Disney, most of which Disney just shook off because they don't care. As far as they are concerned, James Gunn violated one of their sacred policies, and they handled that as best as they could. But while they were while they had made their mind up, you had petitions that had huge amounts of signatures to reinstate James Gunn. Because here's the thing, for as much as people are screaming out, and I actually saw a couple of YouTube channels today that was like, no, he violated it, he shouldn't come back, but he apologized. Okay, that's one of the reasons why I stick with James Gunn, is because he did apologize. Yes, the apology was strangely timed before the first Guardians movie was releasing, but he still apologized nonetheless, and his behavior on social media has reflected that apology. Okay, he has learned his lesson. He has moved on from it, and he still is moving on from it while being in the situation that he is. So while you have these petitions going on, we also had a formal letter submitted to Disney from the Guardians of the Galaxy cast, at least signed by them. I think one of them actually wrote it out. It's in support of James Gunn and saying that they would love for him to come back. But none of them applaud what he did. All of them are sickened by his actions, but they still want to see him reinstated. And Dave Bautista, who plays Drax the Destroyer, has gone so far as to actually threaten to ask for his release if they do not even at bare minimum use the script that James Gunn has already composed for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. So he's gone as far as to say, like, if they don't use the script and he's not there, then I'm going to ask for my release from the part, kind of thing. And Disney's kind of response to all of this stuff has been very vague. They basically kind of hinted that maybe they would push out Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 to avoid all of this backlash, and then maybe they'd start from scratch on it. And I've even heard hintings of like start assembling a new cast and everything like that, and maybe taking Volume 3 and making it a reboot kind of thing, because that's what Disney likes to do. So you have all of this stuff actually happening. Then recently this week, Marvel made their own personal plea with Disney to please reconsider reinstating James Gunn only for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. At bare minimum, just that. And we haven't heard what Disney's response to it as of yet is. A lot of people are unfortunately speculating that Disney's going to stick to their guns because that's what Disney does. But there is an overwhelming amount of support that is hoping that you rehire James Gunn, even if it means just for one more movie to finish out the Guardians movies. He doesn't get any say in any other places, even though the other directors would probably give him that. He doesn't get any of that, and then he's done. He doesn't work for them ever, 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 ever again, kind of thing. So that's a lot to unload. What is you guys' take on the James Gunn situation as it stands right now?
Well, I mean, it's interesting to see just how, I guess it just shows how close-knit they were, considering that I'm even looking at the open letter that was released. It's got Chris Pratt, Bradley Cooper, Zoe Saldana, Vin Diesel, Dave Bautista, Karen Gillan, Michael Rooker, Palm Clementeff, and Sean Gunn. It has all of their signatures on this open letter that was sent out on social media. And the line
was Vin Diesel on it? I couldn't actually see if he had signed it.
I'm looking at it right now. His signature is there. And so it's a case of I can see kind of that level of support, and especially considering that he did apologize for those tweets and saying, hey, yeah, that was years ago. I've evolved. I'm beyond that now. But the fact that Disney kind of panicked, because Disney always panics with any sort of moral crises here. And so on the one hand, I get it. Whether or not Disney is going to listen, it's hard to say. I mean, Dave Bautista has that bargaining power saying, hey, I'm established as Drax if you're not going to bring him back. And thing is, Dave Bautista is not even necessarily pushing them to rehire. He's just saying, hey, let's at least use the guy's script. Let's at least use the ideas.
I actually thought, considering, because look, I know Dave Bautista's career in other avenues, aka he's a former pro wrestler. Okay. I know that how he usually approaches these things, and this was actually amazingly compromising for him. Okay. Usually he's kind of an all or nothing dude when it comes to certain things. And like there is no middle of the road with Dave Bautista in those avenues. Like, it's either black or white. He gets what he wants. He doesn't get what he wants. And if he doesn't get what he wants, he leaves. He's not even willing to do that. He was willing to compromise here, where he wants James Gunn reinstated, and he's made it clear in his statements. He wants him reinstated. He's at least willing to work with the script. And if they don't do the script, that's the last straw for him. He will ask for his release.
Yeah, and so at that point, I can understand where it's all coming from. Whether or not Disney's going to listen, it's very much a case. And this may be the pessimist in me. And again, this is coming from someone who doesn't have any investment in Guardians of the Galaxy. I mean, I saw the first film; it was okay, not as good as everyone overhyped the crap out of it to be. But here, I'm just like, I don't see Disney being likely to blink, even with Marvel Studios making the plea at the 11th hour. I don't see Disney blinking on this.
The other thing that I actually want to bring up to Romney specifically, a lot of people are making the claim that Dave Bautista doesn't even have any clout to be able to make this claim. And look, let's actually kind of go over it. His acting career isn't the greatest right now. He's done a Bond movie because he's been not the full-on villain, but he's been a Bond adversary in one of those movies. He's done a few movies aside from Guardians of the Galaxy, but the way I would actually compare his career right now is he is Dwayne Johnson when Dwayne Johnson started acting. Okay, he's getting all of the weird jobs, and it doesn't necessarily make sense, except in Dwayne's case, they were really, really weird. And at least for Dave, they're at least accommodating for the fact that he is a big, bulky dude. And so he, like, his usual thing is like he gets the not hitman, but the bouncer at a bar kind of thing. Like he looks that part kind of thing. But do we think he's got enough clout to be able to make these claims?
Well, here's the thing. It's kind of the same thing that you see with people like Gal Gadot and Hugh Jackman, where they've been in enough movies. I mean, you've got 3 movies under his belt where he's plays Drax. You've got Guardians 1 and 2, and you've got Infinity War. And it's a case of he's been there enough that's like, hey, I'm clearly established. I'm clearly a fan favorite. And I know that if I leave this project, you're going to have a huge nightmare on your hands trying to promote the film.
Especially, I think he also knows that Drax is as loved as he is.
Yes, and so that's what he's banking on. That's what he's using as leverage. And you saw the same thing with Gal Gadot saying, "Hey, sever ties with Brett Ratner. Or I'm not coming back as Wonder Woman." And Warner Brothers listened because they're just like, "Crap, she's the star of the only successful film we've put out. Let's not lose her." And here, Dave Bautista saying, "Hey, I'm established as this beloved character. People have associated my name with this character." And so he's using that as leverage. And so a lot of people think, oh, but he doesn't have sway. Well, this is actually how Hollywood works. When you've got anyone who plays an established character for long enough, again, like that's how you saw with Hugh Jackman going from being just some random Australian actor playing this superhero to now actually having the leverage to control what kind of movies get made with the character. I mean, again, Ryan Reynolds, best example. He went from just being cast as Deadpool to now actually having control over Deadpool, over the Deadpool movies and how Deadpool is presented. This is just something that happens as a byproduct of the Hollywood system.
The other thing that I kind of want to envelop in here is that because I don't see it discussed a whole lot, but if Dave Bautista left, what do we think the likeliness of others leaving because of him? Now, I know that him and Chris Pratt don't exactly have the best relationship on set. From what I understand, like the fact that they actually talked about Gunn's rehiring and their thoughts on the matter is kind of a big leap for them, because apparently Bautista and Pratt get along on set, but they technically had problems off set. So do we actually see people like Zoe Saldana or Vin Diesel walking away after seeing Bautista walks away?
Out of all the people, I can see Vin Diesel walking away because he's also the kind of person who tends to be pretty.
And I would say Vin is probably a guy with clout.
Yeah, Vin is a guy with clout, but he has a track record of showing extreme loyalty with other cast members. I mean, when you consider the lengths they went for Furious 7 after Paul Walker's death, out of the cast there, I can see Vin Diesel maybe joining in, and that would actually probably get Disney to listen, because it's a case of, well, crap, we lost the voice of Groot, but at the same time, voices can be recast. There are voice doubles available. So losing Vin wouldn't hurt them nearly as much. And so but to the fans, it would be a big statement.
Like,
to the fans, it would get them upset, but it's a case of, okay, well, we're not having to, recast anything. We can still do the animation. As for the others, Chris, it's hard to say either way when you consider that his comments where he had to actually take time to think about how to react to the news about James Gunn. I mean, the exact quote from the interview with Dave Bautista from Business Insider was basically saying that Pratt had to go and pray about it for a while, as, again, a lot of people may not remember, he's a devout Christian, and his faith very much plays,
which is a very difficult thing to be in Hollywood, by the way.
Yes, and just to kind of make it here, he's the one who does it right, where he lives his beliefs. He doesn't try to stand on any soapboxes. He just gets okay, you do you. And that's kind of what more people need to do. But with Chris Pratt, I can see him maybe staying on, because in his mind, he may be thinking, okay, well, kids like me as Star-Lord. I don't want to disappoint them over something like this.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I think his kids love him as Star-Lord.
Yeah, his kids, but when you remember the Super Bowl bet between him and Chris Evans and how the loser had to...
That's true. Yeah, that too. That would also affect things. Yeah.
Yeah, and so Chris Pratt, I don't really see him joining. Zoe Saldana, it's kind of either way, considering how she had to remain Swiss when James Cameron was bashing the Marvel films, and yet she's also tied to the Avatar films. I see her more or less remaining neutral in that regard, but making it known of that she'd like to continue working with James Gunn, but I can see her kind of staying on. Honestly, just out of all the people who've signed the letter, I can see, like, Dave Bautista, if he leaves, I can see Vin Diesel joining him. maybe Bradley Cooper, but again, him, it's hard to say. A lot of the other actors have more to lose if they basically burn bridges with Disney.
Well, here's the thing. I actually don't think Chris Pratt would lose bridges with Disney. Because here's the thing. If Vin is the other guy that has clout, another one that I would actually say if he left with Dave would be a powerful statement would be Chris Pratt. Because here's the thing. I'm not saying every movie that Chris Pratt has done over the last 2 years has been successful, but he's been in a lot of films. And so at that point, he's got the recognition. He's been seen around. So at that point, like, all he has to do to look Disney in the eye and go, I can go work somewhere else. So at that point, like, and Disney, I'm not saying that they would listen to him, but if he walked off with Batista, it's not like he's losing work at that point. He would get work somewhere else.
True. But at the same time, though, you have to remember.
I agree with you. He's not going to walk off because he's a hard worker.
Well, yeah, and it's the other thing to consider is that Hollywood is very much a political game where, I mean, the song Hamilton, or just the entire musical Hamilton, kind of puts it best with the whole notion of Aaron Burr telling Alexander Hamilton to talk less and smile more, never letting people know what you're against or what you're for. And that is true in Hollywood. I mean, if people want to look at a real life equivalent of Game of Thrones that isn't the War of the Roses, look at the Hollywood system. That's as Game of Thrones as you can get. So in Chris Pratt's position, I can see him showing some reluctance in the case of, okay, well, if I side with James Gunn, it may damage the PR. And also in turn, it's case of Chris Pratt, he's kind of in a more precarious position of, okay, he wants to be on everyone's good terms because he's got it really well. If he makes a definitive statement, it's a case of, okay, well, it's a case of if he makes such a statement by leaving with Bautista, then it's a case of, okay, well, he knows what he's doing. That would probably get Disney to listen and panic. But again, Disney is a very big megacorp. And unlike most of this cast, I actually think like Chris Pratt, if he walked off, he'd still get work from Disney. I mean, for crying out loud, he gets minor roles in films now, like with Christopher Robin and all that. It's just because he's a hard worker. So I honestly don't think that would affect him too much. And honestly, Disney has kind of given themselves the best out ever because we all saw Infinity War. It's a case of, hey, if they leave, we can recast and say, oh, Infinity Stones kind of brought them back, but they look kind of different.
Yeah,
it's very much a case of, oh, if they're recast, we can just blame it on the Soul Stone.
Pretty much. So Alex, you've been kind of quiet on this one. What's your take on the whole James Gunn situation here?
It's nice to see Batista take a stand. I mean, when the controversy kind of first broke and when Gunn was kind of fired from Disney, I felt like everybody just kind of passively aggressively showed their support. It's like, oh yeah, you're vocalizing your support for him, but you're not actually doing much. When these are the actors, the stars who could put the leverage and the pressure on Disney to rehire Gunn. And now that we've actually seen one really take a stand, I'd like to see the others take a stand. I don't think recasting would be that simple. Yeah, story-wise, there's an easy hand wave for it, but I think in the long run,
Disney would avoid the whole thing and they wouldn't cast Drax. They just write Drax out.
Yeah, they could write Drax out. Now, if Chris Pratt and Zoe Saldana, that would really make Disney sweat. And
Gamora wouldn't be that hard, but Star-Lord, because he is as loved as he is, and he's actually, from the comics perspective, I think one of the more beloved leaders of the Guardians of the Galaxy, aside from like Adam Warlock. That would be a harder one, but Gamora, that's a 50-50 thing. Plus, Zoe's got other stuff she can do.
Yeah. I mean, it's not so much about where they're going to go. It's just more like what's going to make Disney really start to reconsider the decision. And I think, Chris Pratt, Zoe Saldana, and Dave Bautista would be the ones to really, really swing that onto Gunn's favor and really make Disney reconsider it. I mean, they could theoretically recast it with the hand wave because of Infinity War, but then I think they would probably see a bit of more backlash from the fans and a bit of decline in box office returns because we only had really 2 movies with these characters. So to suddenly recast this quickly, I think would really hurt them in the long run.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, if all this happened, I actually like I've had to think about it the last couple of weeks, and I have debated, you know, from my perspective, whether or not I'd see Volume 3, because like if you look at Volume 2, Volume 2 has a good enough ending that I could be done with it, and I like the fact that James Gunn got so enthusiastic when he finished the Volume 3 treatment, and that the actors all got behind it, that I kind of want to see that. And if I'm not going to see that, if I'm going to see just a Disney retread and Disney kind of taking the reins here, I'll admit I kind of am thinking like I'm good. I don't need to see Volume 3. I've already seen Volume 1 and 2, and I'm okay with that. So final thoughts on this one. Do we think Disney, like, because I guess we were unclear on this when we covered it the last time, do we think that Disney should rehire James Gunn to do this, and also just in light of the backlash, or do you think that they just ought to hire him back in general?
I think they should hire him back in general. There's really no reason for Disney to have fired him in the first place, other than a few Twitter trolls decided to dig up some dirt on him, and you throw it against him, and Disney's like, oh no, we can't have that. We're the family company, even though you have people like Robert Downey Jr. and Tim Allen still constantly in your circle of creativity in films, who've also have unfortunate sins of their past that they've also copped to. And
how many actors do you actually have that have kind of shady records at this point? From what I understand, Zoe's got something. One of the other Guardians members has stuff on the record. I've been told it's Zoe, but I'm not sure on that. You brought up Tim Allen, you brought up Robert Downey Jr., for crying out loud. That's kind of where I'm standing with it, is that if he hadn't done anything about it, if he just hoped that these tweets would go away, then I probably would be on Disney's side at this point, because, you know, fire the scumbag. He's not doing anything right. My problem is, and this is where I get into contention with a lot of others, is he apologized. And he literally, so I'm not usually a guy where like I get swooned over by a simple worded apology. Actions speak louder than words. And as far as what I can actually get from James Gunn, which is his social media, his actions spoke louder than his words. He learned his lesson. He didn't do that anymore. He's, you know, most of the time he's stuck with Guardians, but in a lot of, like, his whole behavior on those social media platforms changed from that point. And so at that point, I'm for rehiring James Gunn, simply because he's learned his lesson. And Disney, you are very keen on telling redemption stories these days. This is one of them. This would be one of those times for you to endorse the redemption stories you've been telling, and to give him a chance at redemption. There's been a solid 5 to 10 years since he's done any of this stuff. He's not the same guy he was when he was writing all that. So at that point, this is giving you the complete in for it to not matter all that much. Is it going to matter to a few people on Twitter? Yes. Is that going to suck? Yes. Are they going to go see Volume 3? Probably not. But the majority right now, the way that it looks like from the support, they're standing with James Gunn. So at that point, I honestly think that if you decided to just wait a while and then just redo Guardians and maybe like reboot it, I could actually see that movie kind of failing in that regard, because a lot of people will still be soured on this whole situation. Romney, where are you at with it? Do you think James Gunn ought to be rehired?
Well, to kind of echo Alex's sentiment, there was no reason to fire him in the first place. One, the tweets were old. Two, he apologized even prior to this most recent time that the tweets had been dug up, because he had to answer for it in the past and apologized back then. He's like, hey, I apologized before, but I apologize now. It was kind of dumb. Yeah. And so it's a case of,
he's apologizing now, and he's been fired.
Yeah, and so it's a case of, he's made it clear, like, these tweets were old. I was more doing it for shock humor. I don't do that anymore because I've matured as an adult. And honestly, Disney just needs to learn to stop with the knee-jerk reactions. I mean, a lot of people are trying to draw a false parallel between...
I would actually say media itself needs to learn that, but go ahead.
Well, yeah, because I mean, people have been trying to draw parallels with this and Roseanne Barr, but it's like, but that's an apples to oranges comparison.
Yeah.
Because, well, the tweets James Gunn tweeted were 10 years old. Roseanne's tweet was, well, from this decade, from last month, in fact. And so it's a case where, that's not a fair comparison, but Disney just needs to learn as a company to not cater to that 24-hour news cycle of immediate response to any such controversy. They need to actually establish themselves as a company that does their due diligence, looks into the issue, takes their time to come to a judgment and then makes a decision. Because here it was clearly a case that they were shooting from the hip, and it shows. So again, to echo Alex's sentiment, he shouldn't have been fired in the first place. But that's most I can say about that, because again, I'm not a big fan of the Guardians films, so I don't really have a horse in this race. But that's kind of where I stand in regards to the whole debacle.
At this point, I'd also be willing to compromise. Just like bring him back for that one movie. After that, you don't have to work with him ever again. You've appeased the people. You've given them their trilogy, and at that point, you can honestly say, and they'd probably be okay with it, nope, after Guardians, his contract's done, and we're not interested in working with him. I think a lot of people would be happy about that. They'd be mad that you're still kind of sticking to your guns here, but at least you gave them this, kind of deal. I think that would go over a lot better than just straight not hiring him back.
Yeah, and looking at this, though, I'm not too optimistic, given that Disney...
No, this is Disney we're talking about.
Yeah, this is Disney. They hold all the cards. They have all the money and power. I mean, although Dave Bautista is trying, and he actually is in a position where he can take that risk, it's literally, they're playing the game of Hollywood budget chicken. Disney is not going to blink. They're gonna keep charging. And so
I think the perfect comparison actually came from our pre-show that we do live on YouTube, and that is simply that Disney and James Gunn is very similar to Nintendo and love ROMs. It ain't happening. There's no remorse. There's no retribution, or there's no redemption. There's nothing. They're just going to do what they're going to do.
Yeah. Although at least means they're taking more of a stand on their content creators than YouTube, though.
Yep. Anyway, moving on into the final story that we have for the evening, and wow, we actually might go over again. This is going to be 2 weeks in a row. Wow, we've been busy. So the final one, this one also got a lot of listeners asking because we're talking about the Oscars, and the Oscars just barely put out a statement where they're going to be making some changes. And in particular, the listeners wanted our opinions because they know that 2 out of the 3 panelists here don't watch the Oscars, and for various reasons in regards to this. So let's go ahead and go over the changes that are going to be implemented for the Oscars from here on in to kind of accommodate the backlash that they've been getting. So the first thing that they're going to be doing is I think this is from this year. Their most recent Oscar telecast was 4 hours long. They're going to actually be looking to take that down to 3 hours. And in order to accommodate for that, they've now officially decided that certain awards will just be given during commercial breaks. And if you want to be able to actually see them, you have to go to, they actually bring up the Dolby Theater, but I have heard that they're going to be they're talking about select locations doing the full telecast via streaming services or via theater access, kind of like the Fathom events that happen locally to us. So you'd be able to still see them, but they would pick awards that they think aren't necessarily what people want to see and do them via commercial breaks and then just kind of catch you up to it. The other thing that they're looking to do is they're going to be adding a new category, which is, I want to say outstanding appearance in popular film, I think is what it's actually titled.
Outstanding achievement in popular film.
Outstanding achievement in popular film, basically making a popular film category to hopefully satiate those that are getting so pissed at them because popular films like, say, Avengers, Black Panther, all that stuff don't ever make it to the Oscars. They never get any acknowledgments unless it's going to be for the occasional makeup award or the occasional lighting award.
Or if someone dies after production.
That too. So these are the main ones that they're actually looking to do. Let's go ahead and go into it from there. So with the changes that have been implemented, what are our thoughts on the changes? I'm going to go ahead and start with the one person that is still watching the Oscars, Alex.
Okay. Well, this is a lot to take in, by the way. Oh, God. So first of all, I hate everything about this just says stupid to me because it's like, even then, I don't think the last Oscar telecast hit 4 hours. I think it was about 3.5 maybe. But three's been pretty typical. Occasionally, yes, you've had the really long runners, like the one time when Whoopi Goldberg hosted. I know that pushed the 4 hour mark. So I don't know why they're so worried about runtime, but I get it because it's This, you know,
Well,
they
networks.
started pretty.
This is basically them placating the networks.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
So I don't think. Still, I think it's really what a scummy thing to kind of just relegate several awards because you know it's going to be pretty much most of the minor, quote unquote, minor awards. I always hate that, by the way, because I think that diminishes the achievement. Maybe
the Geeky Awards would be another apt way to describe them.
Yeah, you know, it's gonna. I think I think the ones that would likely get demoted to being relegated off screen.
I think it would change each year, but go ahead.
Would be like sound. Would be like the sound categories, the cinematography category, production design, film editing, short film. You know, if you're looking to trim the fat, maybe cut out a few montages here and there, because my God, there's always like 50 of those every ceremony. Yeah. Even I still remember like the 2008 awards when Jon Stewart hosted, and he cracked a joke about it. It's like, I can't wait to see the Academy montage to montages. So that was,
well, because you got to remember, like the reason these montages exist is because the Oscars are a glorified pat ourselves on the back awards.
And I get the in memoriam tribute. I think that should always
be fine. Yeah, when actors pass away, that's great. But then when you do the other montages that don't necessarily make a whole lot of sense, that's when this becomes the pat ourselves on the back awards.
Yeah, or you know, bringing out random people like Joe Biden. That I'm just like, you know, politics aside, whatever you think about Joe Biden, I'm just like, why is he here? What does he have to do with movies?
I don't care what party you belong to. Joe Biden has no place. Joe Biden has no fucking place. Pardon my French, but he doesn't. Al Franken has more place than Joe freaking Biden does.
I just like, I could see this like, you know, I mean, he's long dead now, but I could like see this like 20 years ago, like you brought Ronald Reagan out because, yeah, Ronald Reagan was an actor and Screen Actors Guild president, you know, but like Joe Biden is the vice president of the United States.
That's why I'm saying like Al Franken has more presence to be able to do this because he did Saturday Night Live. He's done he's cameoed in a few movies. He has a lot more to be able to do than Joe freaking Biden does.
Yeah, that was just the most random thing ever. But, or, you know, geez, Al Gore, because I mean, Al Gore made a documentary or two, so there you go. But anyway,
he made a documentary too. Kid Rock has done music for a couple of those. They make more sense than Joe Biden does.
Yeah. Okay, we've beaten that dead horse. We get it.
I'm sorry, we've beat this dead horse already. So let me get to the real stupidity, tip of the iceberg of stupidity here. And that is most popular movie category. Now, Adam, you always joke, and I really disagree with this. Like, anytime a superhero movie or whatever wins kind of the geeky award, you know, visual effects or whatever, it's like, here's your participation trophy. But I'm like, those aren't really participation trophies because making good visual effects is hard. Making good sound mix is hard. Having good cinematography is hard. Those are real work, and that's real achievement. Most popular movie category, that is the literal definition of here's your participation trophy. Yep. Because that's all it is. It's just going to be who is the biggest moneymaker or what movie did everybody see? And in a lot of cases, well, right now, that's going to be Marvel. I mean, because Disney doesn't.
I can't remember who actually said it this week, but I want to bring it up because of what you're saying right here and now. I can't remember who brought it up, but somebody actually made the joke of like, and I was really hoping that Black Panther would win a normal Oscar.
Right. I know a lot of people.
That sums it up.
Yeah, I know a lot of people are predicting Black Panther will take this, but I don't think this is going to go into effect till 2020. So Black Panther will be out of the running probably. It'll probably go to Infinity War too.
But well, the other thing too that you have to consider with this category is and I've seen this debate happen, and it's a viable complaint that can be made. What you're basically saying is that most popular film will actually win this. Okay, that's fine. So they're not going to be acknowledged for their merits, only their popularity. This is a participation trophy. That's what it is. It's not even a normal Oscar. It's not achieved through their own merits. It's achieved through how popular they are. In other words, 2016, Ghostbusters would win it because that was the most popular thing ever.
Probably. Yeah, I mean, we don't obviously know what their official criteria will be because they haven't announced it, but it doesn't take a lot, because what can you really judge it on other than returns, box office returns, critical appeal, which, you know, I mean, Marvel movies generally do get very high scores on like Rotten Tomatoes and that. You know, with a bit of both. I mean, but it's just like all I can see this is just becoming the Marvel category for the next 4 or 5 years at least, because
so basically yet another award that Disney will dominate forever and ever.
Pretty much. I mean, I know, to Disney's credit, they do make legitimately great animated films. I'm not complaining. The Incredibles was great. I enjoyed it. They do make legitimately great animated films, but we're tired of them always taking home and dominating the animation.
And in their credit, when it comes to the Marvel and the Star Wars movies, like they can back the right horse occasionally. So at that point, you can give them at least that credit that they can do that, and they do make amazing animated films. But yeah, I kind of see your point there. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yes. So, and this is, I mean, now anytime like, you know, you hear a popular filmmaker kind of balk, like, you know, when James Cameron a while ago kind of said, when are people going to get superhero movie fatigue, you know, and everybody jumps down their throats, but they have a point because these movies are pretty much the only thing out there making any kind of money, and they're the only thing everybody's going to see, and it's pushing a lot of other films out of the woodwork. And yeah, I can see why a lot of other filmmakers are probably feeling frustrated by this right now, and that's kind of more what this category is, just pouring more gasoline onto that fire.
Yep. Romney, you've been kind of moving around in your chair for a second here, so let's go ahead and go to you next.
Well, I was more fidgeting because my legs are sticking to my chair because it's so hot.
Yeah.
But yeah, like Alex has pretty much hit a lot of it on the head, because it's a case of outstanding achievement in popular film. What the hell does that even mean? I mean, I see that, and it's just a case of, oh, this is basically like, oh, here, we're mentioning movies that you actually watch. Please watch our telecast. Please, we need the ratings. Please watch us. But honestly, again, it's probably going to be dominated by the Marvel movies or whatever company decides to do a whole bunch of lobbying. Because, again, for a lot of people wondering why the Oscars are the way they are, I recommend watching the Adam Ruins Everything called Talent Doesn't Win Oscars, because that's literally all it is. It's basically, I mean, this is a reason why Harvey Weinstein was able to get so many films nominated. It's because he knew which people to bribe, which people to talk to. I mean, it's very much with the Academy Awards. It literally is with Hollywood. It's about who you know, and with the Academy Awards, it's about who you know and who you blow. That's the simplest way to put it.
It's great. Now I'm gonna have to edit that.
Well, yeah, but it's
gonna be who you know and who you Harvey Weinstein.
Oh yeah, but that's the truth. How else can you put it? It's all about the people. It's all about the people you wine and dine and do various favors for. I mean, there are cases of actors doing like personal appearances to people in the voting boards. It's like they'll go to their home to help promote the movie. That's the way it is. And honestly, it's just adding more of the same. I mean, not only is this like the equivalent of the participation trophy, I mean, the best way I could kind of see this, and even then, I doubt they're going to do it this way, because again, like we've said, I'm just going to call the Oscars what it is. It's not just everyone pat each other on the back. It's literally an industry-wide circle jerk we're going full explicit here.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. So at this point, I'll probably have to record like Harvey Weinstein just at the end of the podcast. But
yeah, basically to kind of get back on point, it's very much a case. The best way I could see them doing this is as some sort of audience choice award. But again, that raises the question.
I think that's exactly what it'll be.
Yeah, but that raises the question, which audience? Is it going to be open to the general public, or is it just going to be another section of the Academy, or are they literally going to do the America's Funniest Home Videos thing, where they give everyone a beeper and they just beep whichever one?
I was actually going to say, like, I could honestly see this going down the American Idol route. Like, you text a certain number and you say this movie.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if we're already dealing with people sabotaging campaigns on Rotten Tomatoes, that would be a horrible idea.
But yet it'd be something that the Oscars would do in this case, because they want the most popular one to win.
And it would get people to watch the telecast, because that's the thing with American Idol. Even if people didn't watch the show, they were invested in the voting, because even if they had that sort of voting, it's like, hey, it gets people to watch it.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, Romney, because before I get into my opinion, that's the question that the listeners have. With these new policies put in place, Alex, is it likely that you're going to watch the Oscars next year?
Like I said, this probably won't roll out till 2020, and as for next year, I'm on the fence anyway, because I was a little burned from this past year. Even though there were some really interesting wins, of course, but just got sick of the whole bullshit on stage. But that's another matter. But when this does go into effect, assuming the Academy doesn't renege on it or anything, then probably not, because I'm just like, now you've really just, like I've been more of the Academy Oscar apologist than probably I should be, but that's because, again, I like the concept behind the award, and good. I take the good, I take the bad with it, and I understand there's bullshit behind the scenes, and again, I think this is dumb. This is basically turning it to the MTV Movie Awards or People's Choice or Kids' Choice Awards, and it's silly. And
I'll at least give credit to the awards ceremonies. At least they're being honest about what they are.
No.
So, Romney, same question. With these new policies in place, does this mean you're going to come back to watch the Oscars?
Probably not, because I can just wait for everyone to recap the whole thing for me on Twitter. So I don't even need to tune in. Everyone's going to basically live tweet the whole thing. So I'll just okay, I'll not have to watch whatever unfunny comedian they got to host this. I'll just wait for everything to come out on Twitter. It's literally like with
what's funny is that 80% of Twitter will be more funny than that host.
Yeah, it's just like with E3, the Oscars, or any sort of announcements, I'm just like, I don't even need to watch the streams anymore. I can just wait for it to come out on Twitter. I mean, that's literally how I found out about the Smash Direct. I didn't watch it when it uploaded. I just waited for everything to come out on Twitter.
Yeah, pretty much. So my thoughts on this are pretty much covered by you guys, except I'm going to go a little bit more on a tirade. Okay, so first of all,
is he frozen or is it me?
Am I frozen?
Yeah, you froze for a second there.
Okay, sorry.
I think the mic was the stream was in preparation of, he's going. Well, let's slow it down. Give him a moment to collect his thoughts.
Oh, there you go. Okay, yeah. So what I'm basically saying is I pretty much agree with a lot of what's being said here, but here I go on a little bit more of a tirade because of this. So in regards to the commercials awards, like the ones that will basically be given during commercial breaks, as I said earlier with Alex, I see that interchanging each year, because the bottom line is that they're literally going to look at each award, and they're probably going to even check out the social media interactions with those awards and figure out which one people don't care about and are probably going to want to go take a pee break for, and therefore make those the ones that happen during the commercial breaks. So at that point, most of the time, that's the Geek Awards, because the geeks are usually the ones that care about things like makeup and cinematography and all that stuff. The stuff that they work their asses for, kind of thing, that they know that this is a hard-working job to be able to make that work. So those will be relegated off to the commercials. Lovely. So we don't actually get to see them. Second thing, the popular film category. Yeah, it's a participation trophy at the bare minimum. It's going to be voted via American Idol. I can guarantee you that. And frankly, as people have kind of mentioned already, it's already being considered from a public standpoint as a lesser award than the actual Oscar itself. Okay? And at this point, you're talking to the guy that actually thinks that the Oscar is a participation trophy at this point. Okay? So I don't even know what you call that. A negative participation trophy? And basically, this doesn't even answer my problem with it, which is simply that I want these films to be acknowledged for the hard work that goes into them just as much as it goes into The Revenant, The Wolf of Wall Street, all of the artistic masterpiece, I, Tonya, all of that stuff that gets those accolades and gets that acknowledgement. The stuff that they sit there and go, well, we're earning money, and that's all that matters. That's what I'm asking for, not this. This is catering to a stupid demographic, as far as I'm concerned, and frankly is going to blow up in your face. I give it 2 months. 2 months, and then it's just going to blow up in your freaking face, and your viewership for next year's Oscars are going to plummet. It doesn't even matter that they're implemented by now. They're going to plummet, and that's fine. That's fine as far as I'm concerned. Yeah. That being said, am I going to go and watch the Oscars? Hell no! They've given me no reason to watch it. They haven't even accommodated to the other problems that already exist there. The one thing I found funny, and I actually thought about bringing up in this, no addressing the animation category at all. And that's like one of the biggest problems that we had with the Oscars. So that's not getting accommodated for at all. We're not going to have that problem fixed. And what you're basically doing is adding even more problems, adding even more band-aids to an already gaping wound. So at that point, no, I'm not coming back to watch the Oscars. I'm not coming back to watch the Pat Yourself on the Back awards. You have done nothing to solve the problem.
Yeah. I'm just going to say this, all in favor of starting a petition to convince ABC to stream a telecast of the Saturn Awards instead of the Oscars, because at least the Saturn Awards...
We have a guy for that. Zero, I know you're listening. Go make a petition for that now.
Yes, and for people who don't know, the Saturn Awards is basically an award for science fiction and fantasy, and so I'm just thinking, like, as you were going on the tirade, I'm just like, okay, if there was a telecast for the Saturn Awards, you would be all over it, because that is basically what the Saturn Awards are for.
Pretty much. I don't even watch like the MTV Movie Awards or anything like that because, well, MTV, but at least they are what they are, and they are willing enough to acknowledge this is what they do. And the Oscars, not willing to do that so much. And that's starting to get really far on my nerves. But I'd just like to point out one thing for the record. That's 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out, Academy.
At the old Hollywood game.
Harvey Weinstein. Anyway, so... we have run horribly over, but I think we've pretty much covered all the bases here for this story and all the others. So let's go ahead and wrap things up for the evening. If people want to be able to get a hold of us or check out the content that we provide, Alex the Shadow Blazer, how do they do that with your content?
Find me on YouTube. Shadow Blazer 3000 is my channel. Sorry, I haven't totally uploaded anything. Like I said at the start of the podcast, the week is kind of sucky because this time of year kind of sucks, but I'll try and get something working on this weekend. Although I did by happenstance come across a funny little glitch while I was playing A Hat in Time on my PS4, and that was just amusing.
This is the difference between two of, like, if you guys want to see the interactions between me and Alex when we do Dragon Shadow Let's Plays, he found that glitch cute. I watched it and went, huh, that's a bug. You probably better fix it.
Well, it fixed itself, so it wasn't game breaking. So
I know, but that's not, I'm saying, like, that's our different reactions. You're like, oh, that's cute. I would have been like, that's a bug. Fix it.
Yeah, we're gonna have to talk about this sometime. Just the difference between how we perceive bugs. But anyway, yeah, follow me on Shadow Blazer 3000 is my YouTube channel, and follow me on social media to always be alerted to new videos. At Alex J Short on Twitter.
All right. And Stephen Romney of Studio Ghost Utah, how do people follow you?
Well, you can find me under the handle Studio Ghost Utah. That is my handle both on YouTube and Facebook. I upload to both when I actually have something to upload. You can also find me on Instagram under Romney Does Art. Yes, I know I need to do more art. And I am also on Twitter at Romney Reviews, which is probably the best way to send any content my way, anything you want me to look at, anything you want my opinion on. Seriously, stop sending stuff to Adam. He literally has a second kid on the way. The guy's busy enough. So again, Twitter is the best way to reach me. My Twitter handle is at Romney Reviews. And as for this week's Romney's recommendation, it's something I discovered that's actually made my internet browsing a lot easier. Now, when you talked about internet browsers, a lot of you people maybe have heard of things like, well, there's Internet Explorer, Microsoft Edge, the ones that we can't get rid of despite our best efforts. But then you also have the other major competitors, Google Chrome and Mozilla Firefox. Have you ever wanted a browser that had a built-in blocker for both ads and trackers that try to gather your personal data, that didn't require any extra add-ons that risk breaking the browser, as well as allowing you to load websites much more quickly both on your PC and on your smartphone? I'd like to introduce you to a browser called Brave. Brave is a web browser that has a built-in tracking blocker, a built-in ad blocker, that also has a private browsing mode that allows you to route your traffic through the Onion router for further protection of your privacy, and it allows you to compensate the websites that you do want to support, since it also is built into a blockchain, which means you can donate cryptocurrency to specific websites. So say there's a blog that you visit that takes currency on that blockchain. You're like, hey, I like this guy's content. I spend a lot of time on this website. Let's donate some of the blockchain currency that I've generated from my browsing to this website to support them. And honestly, although I am not too familiar with the blockchain donation, I'm like literally as I'm using it right now on this live stream, the other benefit, if you're someone who does a lot of YouTube, You don't have to use Google Chrome to do Google Hangouts anymore. You don't have to have the 2 browser windows open and having to jump back and forth just to keep up. It's a browser that is like Firefox, but it plays nice with Google Hangouts, and it's nice to not have companies like Facebook being able to track my browsing habits when I don't want them to. So that's this week's Romney's recommendation, is the Brave browser, available for both smartphones and for PC and Mac. You can load websites a lot more quickly on that browser. It's a really good browser. I highly recommend it. So that's this week's Romney's recommendation, is the Brave browser.
All right. And if people want to be able to get a hold of me, well, already you're on my channel, which is youtube.com/Drac2326. And I guess the one thing that I would ask is, while you're watching this podcast, please take a look at some of the other content that I provide on YouTube. I mostly do Let's Play stuff, but I do video game reviews, as well as give my thoughts on various aspects of gaming and other geekery that I can actually come across. In fact, that's probably what you're going to be seeing a lot of in the coming weeks, if I actually can get a video up, 3 a.m. wake-up calls and all that. That's probably what you're going to be able to see, is me going into my opinions on stuff that's going on. But that also, you can contact me on Twitter via @Drac2326, and you can ask your questions there as well. If you want to be able to support the podcast, or be able to mostly support the podcast, the first thing we recommend and ask that you do is support the RSS feed, which is geekyweek.podomatic.com. And you can also search on iTunes or Google Play for Android users for the GNRO podcast or the Geek News podcast, and it will bring you up to those pages. If you want to be able to support us on social media, you can do so under the exact same tagline, which is Geeky NRO, and that's for Twitter and also for Facebook. You'll get up-to-the-minute information when we're going live, the stuff we'll be talking about, and even some added stuff for you guys as I try and bring that out to you when I can get a free minute. But, with baby, that's probably going to be a little bit more complicated. And also, if you want to submit stories or be able to submit feedback to the podcast, because we welcome that, you can do so at geekyweek@gmail.com. And that's going to go ahead and do it for us this evening. And also, that's going to go ahead and do it for me for at least a couple of weeks to a month, as that baby is coming very, very close. And so I'm actually going to be, thankfully, leaving the podcast in very good hands, as Romney and Alex are actually going to be taking over for it. And hopefully you guys will be able to support them and be able to support the podcast while I'm off, burping babies, changing diapers, and all the fun stuff that parents do. And so in the meantime, that's going to go ahead and do it for this podcast. So thank you guys so much for all the support that you guys give to the podcast, as well as to any work that I or my panelists have been able to do. And for me, for Alex, and for Romney, we will see you guys next time for even more geek news, reviews, and opinions.